Okay, folks, this is Russell Babbitt here, and this is the first episode, 0.0 of As Far as I Can Tell. It's my new conspiracy slash deep thoughts podcast that you can lay awake in your bed and question the nature of your reality and why the heck you are in it, too. So I have the Great Baldini here, and I'm going to ask him a couple questions about morality and goodness. And I hope that you guys enjoy it as much as I do. All right, Baldini, how you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm on this side of the garden, so I suppose that's a good thing. There are days that I wonder, as we were talking earlier, and I kind of shared with you, I get a little weary of seeing man's inhumanity to man, and so I seem to have lost my survival instinct in that regard. but but no, I'm happy to be here with you. It's always enjoyable when we have these little chats, and I'm delighted to be here on your very first podcast. I'm really honored.
Thank you. Yes, and it's an honor, sir. An honor and a pleasure. So, being that we're starting from, and it's not just you, this is a state of kind of existential malaise. It's a cultural thing as well. It's just an experiential thing. Those who are living in the modern time, as well as those who lived in any other time, are now, though, we're hyper aware of, like, any suffering can be magnified times 10 because you or I can speak to someone else that's would be, almost unrelated in a different technological era. And yeah, this is it's good that you're starting from there because that'll humble us, and then we can build up, I guess, kind of to something to where we can have a great conversation. But let's start it with something good here.
Okay.
So my mother, who's she's involved in ministry, but she doesn't really do ministry. They ask her to teach Bible study, but she doesn't read the Bible that much. She goes to it every day, and she totally is she's into it, but that's not, that's not how she quantifies her, I guess, her experience, her Christianity. Um, she said to me earlier, "God has changed my heart. Instead of me desiring to have the most or be first, now I desire to come up alongside people and edify them." Um, that really spoke to me, and I'd like you to maybe speak to that. Like, how does God enrich your life in that way, or does he?
Well,
Does
yeah,
he?
I mean, I was nodding as you were, saying that because that's exactly that's mirrors very closely my experience with, and for your listeners, when I refer to Dad, that's that's who I call the Creator, right? That's my experience with him. Is that it's not a deity. I mean, certainly he is, and I'm in awe of who he is and his power, and his brilliance as a creator. But my intimate relationship with him is as a dad and a good father, not not a mean, angry, um, violent, you know, not that, right? So my experience with dad in that regard is very much that way. That as we spoke previously, and I guess probably be confusing for people if they didn't hear the other part of the conversation. But
Oh,
you
I'm gonna chop that in. So but go ahead.
yeah, so um, when when I stopped running from his invitation to come into relationship with him, my understanding, I grew up in a family that was, you know, very conservative Christian and very. I would say very religious and very legalistic in that regard. There was a lot of attention paid to rule keeping, and so that kind of defined a bit my expectations. That if I were going to, so to put some context to it, at this point, I was about 30 years old. So this is, 25 years ago. Um, and I had been pursuing and doing really well at a career in the entertainment industry, music industry, living in Los Angeles, and partying like a rock star. To be perfectly honest, I had a really a good thing going, and then some things started to change, and it wasn't those changes so much as a responding to his invitation. I frankly got tired of running, and what I what had led up to that in my early life was that um, I had always been aware of and very sensitive to the presence of the supernatural. So there was never a question for me of whether there was a God or whether there was good or evil beings. I could very clearly sense them and be aware of their presences, and so it made sense to me to respond to those. And so early on, I had experience with both sides. I had tried to be a good Christian because that was what my family sort of expected, and that was what seemed right. I had a sense of right and wrong and wanting to do the right thing. But I also found that in terms of keeping the rules and doing good things, I was a failure. I was really bad at being good. But conversely, I was really good at being bad. Um, so from like teenager or whatever, early on as a musician, and sort of living the dream of sort of being a rock star. Like I get signed to a record deal when I was 17. So I was living that life that a lot of people really kind of idolize or whatever, and it seemed it was a lot of fun. And so there was a time where I was prepared to do the typical sell your soul to Satan or whatever, and do that sort of thing.
R Yeah.
And it turned
Which
out.
is not that's, like, I think very few, in the industry are even taking that literally, but they know what the fuck we're talking about.
Well, I think at the beginning, they don't take it literally. I think ultimately, what happens is one way or the other, whether it actually literally is a deal with the devil or whether it is a deal with the world that takes your soul and has the same ultimate result. I think most do, right? It is very difficult in this industry to keep um, a close relationship, the kind of relationship that I would consider following the way or following the teachings of Jesus. I think it's very difficult, not just because of what happens inside you, but because of what the expectations are. And frankly, my experience again in my later life is the closer that I come, and I think part of this is what you mentioned in terms of the nature of the world now. It has changed a good deal since just during my lifetime. But the closer that I get to being at least some representation of what I think the Creator and Jesus are, the more unpopular I become with the world. I, I do draw individuals who are desperately seeking love, but in terms of material success and what's popular and accepted in the world, it's the upside down. It costs everything, and I have warned people who have been desirous of trying to follow this path or whatever, is that on the one hand, it is the best thing that I've ever done, and I couldn't imagine my life without it. On the other hand, it will cost everything. There's no, it's not a lifestyle accessory. It's not a, it's not an app, right? It's an operating system. So
Right, well, we can't clip the Dow onto our smoking jacket and then
yeah,
wear it like a lapel pin
yeah, it
and
doesn't. It's not a. It's not a jacket you put on, right? It's not.
say, "Oh, I walk the path. I follow the way."
Yeah.
Well, okay. Like
I know if you follow the way this is the way I put it a lot of times, is that all he wants is everything, right? And it takes absolutely everything, and even those things. In my experience again is that even if it's not a bad thing, even good things in your life, if it's something that you don't want to let go of and that you have put greater importance on, if it's so important to you that you are not willing to give it up, he's going to for sure ask you for it and take it away, not because it's bad for you, but because he wants nothing to come in between, and ultimately it becomes a state of total reliance. And a lot of people really push that, causes them to bristle really badly, right? And ultimately I can get to the fact that most people reject the true relationship with the creator because of ego. They don't want to be reliant on anyone, and they feel like it puts them in a state of um, uh, subservience. And while I guess technically that is true in semantics, but the way they see it is a state of slavehood, and they're working for a bad taskmaster. And my experience is quite the opposite of that. That it is someone that I love very much, and whose desires for me are always good. And if I will yield my will, then the outcome is always so much better by orders of magnitude than whatever I could have imagined or wanted or accomplished myself. So there's no shame in it. There's no uh, I don't consider myself less of a person because I'm reliant on somebody else to fulfill my needs. Right. So, but I find that most people who reject it, they bristle and they become um, angry with the idea that they have to become reliant, or they don't like the word worship, and that's a again, that's a weird thing for people. They think it's like a requirement, like um, like he needs or wants your worship, and I just don't see it like that. It's like, it's again, I totally liken it to a relationship, that I want to spend time with my wife, and if I would say I'm jealous of her time, it's not that I'm jealous that somebody else is going to come between us, but I love when she pays attention to me. That makes me
Yeah.
feel loved, right? And so if she's involved in something else to the point of being um, so distracted and ignoring me, that would hurt my feelings, right? And so it's exactly like that, right? It is in every way I can liken it to an intimate relationship that um, I want to be with my wife, and I want to be with my maker. I don't cheat on or do bad things to my wife because I don't want to hurt her. In the same way, I don't want to do things that are displeasing to dad, because not because I'm afraid of any punishment, but because I don't want to hurt his feelings. Like that, it would make me sad, right?
For
And
sure.
usually the result of that is just some sort of personal failure where I know that I could have done better, or I know that I could have helped someone and I didn't because I was afraid. So um,
Mhm.
so ultimately, that's how I approach this, and that's what it is to me. Is it's a very deep, intimate relationship with someone who cares very much for me, who knows me much better than I know myself, who's so much wiser and smarter, and good in every way. And so kind of skipping back to this thing where I stopped. Well, I can go back further. So I said I was bad at being good and good at being bad, and so I was a really really crappy Christian. I had decided that that if I was going to get beat up by both sides, because from my perspective it seemed as though both the light and the dark were after my soul, if you want to put it that way. And I couldn't just ignore it. I couldn't be one of those people to whom it all seemed like a fantasy or whatever. It was very real to me again, because I was very aware of that that was real, that there was a thin veil, and that the material reality that we see, I often liken it to the idea that when you see a tree and you look down at it, it casts a shadow, right? The sun shines on it, it casts a shadow. That is the world. The material world is the shadow. It's a two-dimensional, colorless thing, like two color, light and dark, and it's a shadow. Whereas the tree is the real life. That's what happens beyond us. And if you want to think in terms of dimensions, it's like a tesseract, right? Like 4 dimensions is to 3 dimensions is 3 is to 2. And that's the way I describe it, is that shadow is a 2 dimensional representation of the 3 dimensional physical object. And so 4 dimensions would then be to 3 dimensions that same way. It's a shadow. And when you go upwards in dimensions, we are but this tiniest little representation, and in a holographic way to think of it, we're just a little chip off the block, but it's just the smallest representation of the bigger thing. And so those who regard the material world as all that there is, and that the spiritual world beyond it is a joke, to me, that's the upside down view, right? That this is sort of a, I don't want to say a joke, but it is so far less meaningful than what is happening in the spiritual domain and the unseen world, that yeah, it's upside down to perceive it as though this is all there is. So anyway, I felt like, again, they were like, there was this battle for my soul going on. I thought, well, if I can't be good, right, then at least I'm going to get power somewhere, right? I'm going to be bad. I'm going to be, I'm going to go from being really trying to be really good. I'm going to be bad. And so, I did that, and there was a great sense of power and some accomplishment there. And I got all these things that I wanted with very little effort. And people were drawn to me, and I could have all these things and all these women, and all the success. And then, but it had these negative components to it as well. And I felt, my soul was slipping away, and I literally battled with darkness on a number of occasions. And I opened the door to really, really bad things, and literally physically and spiritually battling demons, I guess is the only other word I mean, that's direct. That is what it is. I mean,
Yeah, oh,
I don't
for
mean to,
sure.
woo,
I
but
yeah, I don't, I'm not here to espouse or to like legitimize or to show the legitimacy of claims like demons,
yeah,
but I can tell our listeners with an honest, pure heart that I have battled with the best way I could describe them to, and anyone that knows how to speak English would be to say they are demons.
yeah,
And that's, I can't like I can't speak to their interpretation of how that might look, like the poltergeists don't go into the light, shit, or what those things look like, or what forms they take, or how many teeth they have and how loud they will. But I think the common man, people know what we're talking about when we say that, because we all battle with demons, even those atheists who think that demons are just in their own mind, just a fabrication of their own fucking little tiny sector of reality, and they're not these non-corporeal entities, non-physical entities. I think we all know that. So
well, as regards both demons and if you want to say God, or the higher power, or the entire role of all those in that other domain. My purpose in describing it is not to convince anybody, or try to me just telling you about my experience with that is not to try to evangelize or convert anybody or convince anybody. I'm just telling my story. And again, I can only describe it from my experience. And so whether people, I don't care if they believe it or not. That's it's nothing to me. I don't I'm not going to go, but you have to believe me. I don't, I don't care. Right. Again, it means nothing to me. My experience is my experience, and it's part of my path and my journey. So, I have no compunction about discussing it, or compulsion to try to again convince anyone. It just is what it is. And so I can tell you again, part of a perhaps a different part of the conversation, but I can describe a bit better about what mm, about the demons I experienced, or whatever, and what that was like. But that's really to get back to the the reason that it's as part of the story is that so so I ran into some bad stuff there, and then tried to run away. And so really I would say that I ran back to the light, if you want get corny about it. God saved me from that and released me from it. But then, as often happens, I became complacent. And as long, it's often the case, as long as things are going okay, and the you make ends meet and if things run pretty smooth, that's where most people want to sit, right? And nice in that pocket. And really, the closer I find, the closer that you draw toward either side, the more crazy life gets. So whether, if you're going to draw closer to the creator, shit's going to hit the fan, man. It's it's going to take away any sense of ease and comfort that you have in life. And so I wasn't down with that, right? So I spent a number of years in what I call sort of an uncomfortable standoff, with dad, with the creator. It's like, I was aware of him. I acknowledged him. I wouldn't speak poorly of him, but I wasn't going to chase after him. Right, my life was pretty good. I just didn't need that kind of thing, and I wasn't prepared to live what I viewed as and what I grew up with, the Christian life. Going to church and being churchy church, and using all the Christian buzzwords, and no brother, and it wasn't my thing. And then again, what really happened was that the invitation grew stronger, and I had a huge empty hole in my life. I was just lonely, and he knocked, and I answered. And so, in answering the call, so I left LA. I went to Northern California, and I was editing some books for somebody, and writing some articles for trade magazines, and just kind of being a hermit for a minute. And then, what I anticipated, Russell, is that I would have to give up all these things: smoking, drinking, smoking pot, all party life, and all this sort of stuff. And I'd become a nerd, and all this stuff. And that, weirdly, and to my great surprise, that's exactly not what happened. He didn't care about any of that stuff. He ignored all those things, and said, That's not your problem. That your problem is that your heart is broken, and that's why you do those things. So let me work on your heart, and that stuff won't be a problem anymore. And he did. He went straight. He went straight from my heart. And frankly, at the time, what I felt was that he was breaking it even more. It took away everything from me, but that's what was necessary to start off from a clean slate. And so that all I had was reliance on him. And then once that happened, and I grew into this relationship, things changed in ways I really can't describe. My experience in following the way has nothing at all to do with religion, a church, a building, any of that stuff. It's entirely an internal, intimate relationship between me and my creator, where he makes me, or at least encourages me. He doesn't make me, but he draws me into trying to become a better, into really what I would say is who he made me to be. And at one point, we had this conversation, and he said, "Hey, um, all I'm trying to do is to get rid of the things of you that I didn't make, right? That self-made man that you were, and I can't use that stuff, right? I want to turn you into the person I created you before all this fucked up stuff happened to you." And
Yes.
then you developed all these poor coping skills, right? Um, to deal with that. And so I can't use any of that stuff. And all I want to do is get you back to the person that I made. And the only reason it hurts so much is because you don't want to let go. And I was like, oh.
Well, and that that I was just listening to this thing today, and I might not understand it totally correctly, but I guess Nietzsche wrote a book called "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," and the he, at some point, Zarathustra goes and he tells the rest of humanity. He goes up on a mountain, he gets all this wisdom, and then he comes back down and he's like, "You guys, we can be Superman. We can transcend manhood and get into something where we're actually helping each other, and that's our sole purpose." but he says in order to get there, we have to become the last man or the final man. And the final man is like totally self-involved, doesn't give a fuck, but it's a necessary evolutionary step to get there. And the people just go, dude, you can keep the Superman. We'll take can how do we become final men? And he's like pulling his hair out. He's like, dude, what the fuck, man? I was trying to share this wisdom with people and they opted for the shortcut. But um it seems like, and Nietzsche also said something about always to the desert. Like people who gain enlightenment seem to have lost a ton in that process, and it seems, I guess, kind of unfair, but if you really consider, how life works, that's it seems like it may be the only path is to shed a lot, to lose a lot in the dropping of those veils.
That's been my observation and my experience. I can't say, in every circumstance that that's going to be true, but it certainly has been both my experience and my observation. And I've said that, I put it this way: in order for God to use a man greatly, He has to break him deeply, right? And it requires, again, that you be broken. Um, okay, so here's a little story, right? It's a little, I would say, Christianese story or whatever, but because it uses some of that imagery. But
Yeah.
but one of the things that I used to see, in that sort of Christian world, right, is you got this picture of the white surfer Jesus, right, as the shepherd, and he's got a little lamb there on his shoulders, right, and I was like, oh, that's all sweet, nah. And he's the shepherd with the little lamb. But one of the things that, as I began to really study deeply into Scripture, and I go, because there's all this stuff about, who wrote it, and who changed it, and messed with it, and there's all these translations, right? And so
Yeah.
it makes it all weird, right? And then you got this group who's like King James only version, right? And then you've got the ineffable, unchangeable, word of God, and people go, this word for word thing. And that's, again, I have a very different take on Scripture, like all of not just biblical Scripture, but extra biblical, and Scripture from, wisdom from other, religions, whatever you want to call it. That I find truth everywhere. And but my take on the Bible, just real quickly, is that, do I think it's inspired by God? Sure. I think it's, my observation and my impression of it is that, it is largely written by people who had, a supernatural experience with, a supernatural being, and it fucked them up so badly that they went through extraordinary measures to write it down. But they also put a lot of their own interpretation into it, right? They tried to, understand what the motives of God was, and He says very clearly, that His ways aren't our ways, and so He's way bigger than we are, and we can't understand Him. So it's sort of like, a child whose parents tell them to clean their room. You're like, you hate me. Well, clearly, as adults, we understand that's not the motivation of the parent. Because we hate our kids, we want them to clean their room, right? That's clearly
Right.
what we
Right.
want is for them to develop some discipline, and not be pigs. So the child doesn't understand the motivations of the parent, and I see, evidence of that throughout, especially some of the Old Testament. And they understood, um, the actions of God, and even in a lot of places what they, ascribed as actions of God, which may not have been. So, like, the Lord was dismayed, and so He smote him. Okay, well, maybe the
Oh, for sure. Or like
yeah.
they're, when like it's my thought that, I'm sure at that point there was Moses was talking to people, and I don't doubt that he had some kind of interaction with a supernatural being, uh, where he came back down and was like honestly, sincerely changed, and it had I think that was a thing. But people then say that, like, God was angered when he came back down and saw that they had built the statue and were, like, defaming him or something, and so he sent
Actually, the way I
snakes.
read it is that Moses was unhappy, right? Right. I don't read that, God was. I mean, I think God understood what was going on. I think it was Moses that was displeased, right? He was like, oh, for fuck's sake, guys,
For
guys.
sure, and then they say God, God sent snakes to and they killed many of the Israelites. I'm like, isn't it, to me, seems far more likely that, like, you guys were caught up in idol worship, and you were so involved in that that snakes di
Yeah,
snakes
you
bit
may
a
have
bunch of
opened the
you
door.
guys, and
You
you
may have
weren't
opened the
really
door to
paying
that.
attention to that shit.
Yeah, you may have opened the door to that, and so you got a little comeuppance of, you put your hand on the stove, and then it was burned.
But I don't think God sent those snakes, and I don't think that, like, you know, I don't think the book is there to tell us that if you displease God, he's gonna send snakes to kill you.
And I agree with that. So again, so my take on the whole thing, right, is that what it does do is offer some context of, here are some things that's happened before, right, and that, basically the way I read it is you were born into the midst of a, millennia old battle, right, between good and evil, and whether you like it or not, it's not your fault. You were born into a fucked up situation, and there's a battle raging all around you, and whether you want to or not, you're a part of it, and you get to choose sides. And but it's also an invitation, to get into a relationship with your creator, and if you accept that invitation, everything after that is sort of academic. The words of scripture can certainly help you understand some things better, and certainly give you some wisdom. I mean, if any, I challenge anybody, read the book of Proverbs, right? There's 31 books of Proverbs. Read one every day, one book, the day. So on the first day of the month, read Proverbs 1. On the second day of the month, if you do that, right? If you did that for 3 months, and just, you would have to understand that there's, I mean, I think anybody with brains would go, there's wisdom here. Even if you ignore the parts that they deal with God, if you don't like God, whatever, just ignore that if you want to. The insight that it has on the human condition, is brilliant, right, and so insightful. So there's wisdom in this book, right? So it's helpful. But what I really see its value is that it's an invitation, to join into a relationship, and if you do that, then the rest of it will make better sense. And so,
Yeah.
my personal experience again is that, my relationship with Dad supersedes any commandment in Scripture, any dogma, any, theology, that can be found in Scripture. Again, I think there's value in it, in what's written there, and it certainly gives some wisdom and insight. But the words of Jesus, again, he said, "My sheep will know my voice," and I understand that, because, it is a it's an ongoing process. It does take time to differentiate, between the whisper of him talking to you, and your own thoughts bouncing off the inside of your head, or even the whispers of a temptation, right, or somebody, posing. I mean, it can be tricky, right? And I mean, it's also been said that, when you talk to God, it's prayer, and when He talks to you, it's psychosis. But I don't believe that. But there are those who think that. So,
Right.
so if you go, well, I'm listening to the voices in my head, people can be pretty weird about that. But I would say that I don't often hear him as an audible voice. I mean, it's, I've had
Well,
encounters with him on numerous occasions.
right.
But I will say that, mostly it is, it's a powerful impression. Often, the way I would describe it is it's thought before it ever gets to words, right? So that's one way I kind of know, that it's him communicating with me, is because it's pure thought before it ever gets translated into, idioms, right, and words, because we are idiomatic. We translate thoughts and ideas into words, and it's the pure thought before it's even gets there. And I also know that he's way in the hell smarter than me, and so, uh, when he gives me wisdom and insight that's far beyond me, that's not just some bit of my id or ego that, is just a little bit beyond me. This stuff is like way beyond me. So, again, I'm not trying to convince anybody or anything like that. I'm just saying these are ways that I know, and also I can confirm that, the person that I know, this being, I have met numerous other people who is very clear, as we discuss our relationship, that they're having a relationship with that identical person, right? I mean, in every way, they're describing the same person. We may have different, aspects to it, and he deals with like a parent deals with each of their children differently, but it's absolute that we're dealing with the same entity. And so one of the things that I find fascinating, or I would say disappointing, really, is that most people who carry the moniker and the title of Christian seem to me to have never have met this person whatsoever. Um,
It's like we spoke about on Facebook. Somebody had posted about something, and I love that guy. He posts some fantastic stuff. But he said something about, adults arguing about religion is similar to my dad could beat up your dad. And he
Mhm.
said, but the only difference is neither of their dads are real. And you you just said, I don't know, man, but that's, my dad seems to be real. Like, I'm not, I'm just saying, as far as I can tell, he's real.
Yeah,
And then the guy was like, I don't know. And then I just said, I know, I think you guys are not talking to the same God.
right.
Like, I'm not saying that people aren't speaking to maybe some divine or some like godly, like lowercase g
Yep.
form of a god, where and it's like you spoke about, when you spoke to the man who was dying. I think it was your father, maybe even.
Yep.
The God that he channeled, that he spoke from, that he delivered, that God's
Message or whatever. Yeah.
message exactly. It was him. It
Yep.
wasn't God. It was just him dressed up as God so that he could feel comfortable saying that
Yep.
with authority.
I find most people, especially those in, I would say, Christian ministry, right? Uh, their God is an elevated version of themselves. They project themselves as God, and so their God believes everything they believe, and votes the same way they vote, and likes the same things they like, and dislikes the same people they dislike. And again, my experience is that is absolutely not my experience with dad at all. Dad is very, very different than I am. And one of the things that helped me better understand, right? So here is some wisdom he gave me, is that I understood from reading the teachings of Jesus, because this is where I kind of come from, right? Is that he said some really, really wacky stuff, and some of it's very difficult, right, to digest. But one of the things he said is that, I tell you the truth, that the son could do nothing without the father, and I only do what I see my father do. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to use him as my guide. And I'm going to do whatever he said. And so what I saw him do is he deeply loved people, and people were drawn to him because of this love. And so I'm trying to figure out, what is love, right? And so I read all this stuff, and there's all these different positions that, love is a decision, right? It's a choice that you make, or love is a condition that you get into. And certainly we all think love is a feeling, right? It's this emotion, this overpowering emotion, and there's different things. And what ultimately I didn't come to, is that he just told me this. He goes, so, you've got this problem. You keep trying to define love as this intangible, um, you know, um, abstract idea. And let me tell you the truth, that, right, love is not a thing. Love is a person, right? And he's the creator. And I, once that soaked in, and I understood that. See, one of the things that we understand in a human sense is that we always say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we certainly can see this and observe this in our world and throughout history, is that when people have power over others, they use it to lord over others, and it makes them really bad, hostile people. And so when you get to the ultimate in power, and people often, again, project this onto their idea of God, is that he's this all-powerful being who's an asshole. Well, what I find, my experience is that quite the opposite. I have such a difficult time really comprehending how someone as powerful, and I'm the way I see it, is such power to create everything. And when I understand everything, it just it blows my mind completely to not only understand it, but to design it and make it so that it lasts. And so but he's got
Wait, we're
all
not
this.
just talking about to create the benevolent forces that people are drawing from to do their good or bad actions. We're talking about the atoms that make up the
Yes.
people that are carrying out those good or bad actions.
And the
We're talking about
interconnectedness of
the
all things, and I mean, even to make, we can't even make an amoeba, right? Like a single cell, we can't make life. And so the amazing power and majesty and brilliance of this being is crazy. But here's the other side of it, is that he is every thing, like every all things that are good and love, um is what he is. And so I often will say, if love is not the motive, God is not involved. Everything that he does is rooted and based in love. And so with that understanding, right, and so um that's what I'm drawn to, and that's how my experience with him is, in every way, is that everything that he does in his interactions with me, even when I feel that it's mostly painful because I didn't get what I wanted, right? Or I'm uncomfortable, or this situation is not fun, right? This sucks. I'm not living my best life, right?
yeah.
Right? And that's not really the point. That's hard to grasp sometimes. Is That's not really the point. And again, the purpose for being here is not to collect a bunch of stuff, right? Or to sit around and drink ambrosia and bang a bunch of chicks. I mean, that it seems
You
fun
never
for a
see a
while, but
U-Haul behind a hearse.
right? Right. So once I started to grasp the nature of love, and that part of the way, right? So people struggle, to keep all these commandments and to do all this good stuff. And what happens again is, we're told, and again, I agree with this idea that it's impossible for us to be perfect and good, right? So if the bar is perfection, and we know that we can never reach that and attain that, then if we're still trying to do that, the only point of comparison then is to compare ourselves to one another. And so that's how we measure how well we're doing, is by, well, I'm doing better than this guy, right? I might be fucked up, but this guy's really fucked up, right? um, and
Yeah.
so
Oh, yeah.
and so this is mostly how I view what Christians do, and this is why I'll say dislike them, but man, I keep saying this: the biggest obstacle to Christianity are Christians, all right? And it's only 99% of them that give the rest a bad name, because they're not. Yeah, I mean, even the idea of a religion being named after him is preposterous to me, because it seems that the whole purpose of, well, not the whole purpose, but the vast majority of his teachings were that religion will not put you into a relationship with dad, right? It's your heart that does it. It is a relationship. Religion is useless, right? So he's telling you that religion and trying to do these things will not gain you any favor, right? You can't do it. He doesn't care. All the good things that you did, you're still broken and busted, and you're still at war with him because your heart is against him. So that's not going to get you anywhere, right? So what you need to be is in relationship with him. Hey, that's a great idea. Let's start a religion. Yeah, right?
Right, exactly. Like
Preposterous. And
like,
so
with the best of intentions, with the
with
best of
probably the
intentions.
best of intentions, but then not, right? We have the history of the Catholic Church to demonstrate, right, in spades.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
So
dude.
without even getting into that, but unfortunately, that's what most people think when they go, well, all the badness in history has come from Christians and Christianity. Well, it's this church that you can clearly see didn't follow. I mean, it's kind of a cop out, right? So there's a
Right, those
lot
guys aren't, they aren't even Christian, they don't even call themselves Christians.
now, and so
They're
there's a lot of animosity
it's
toward both
pretty
God
clear,
and this
they're
idea.
like, "We're Roman Catholics."
Mhm.
Like, the name of their state comes before even anything that has to do with God.
Yeah, and when you look really closely at their entire quote religion, it is entirely Luciferian in construct. It is exactly it's a mockery of who God is in every way, and they have taken the position of God and usurped his position. In fact, they'll even clearly say so. Right, the Pope, he's God on earth, and
Oh,
it's revolting to me in every sense. It's just repulsive and repugnant. It's all these, I can't even. And again, I'm not bashing on any Catholics. That's not the point. But I'm saying this institution is specifically designed to keep you as far away from coming into a relationship with your Creator as possible. And in fact, almost every human institution, is, insofar as I can see, as far as I can tell, I'll quote that, is
Yeah.
everything in the human, that humans value, at least in terms of society throughout history, has been to get you as far away from making that connection as possible. So in the past, we see that it's the worship of sex, the worship of pleasure, right? These idols and the power that can come from joining with demons, they can give you all kinds of power. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of power to be had there, and then so there's probably some enjoyment, but it keeps you from that relationship with your creator. And then we get to military power and might, money, all these things again feed the flesh, but they kill your spirit and they keep you far away from that. But even religion, as an organized thing that it stands between you and your creator. And now we have this hyper materialistic, nihilistic worldview, where everything is the material, and so anything that is spiritual is mocked, and it's considered superstition, whereas the age of science and reason, and we throw away any idea of that. And so it's one of the things that, for example, Crow 777 often talks about, is that there's this uh, transformation, right? This alchemical transmutation, right? To create an artificial world to separate you from nature, and there's truth there, right? I mean,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
without getting into the alchemical aspects of it, I mean, again, not that there's not some truth to be found there. I find truth in every place, even in Luciferian philosophy, there is some truth there. There wouldn't be an attraction to it if there wasn't truth there. No trap works without bait, right?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
for
so
sure.
there's
And
got there always
like
has
you
to
say,
be.
chew up the meat and spit out the
But
bones.
at the
Like,
bones, exactly. You have to have good discernment, and so I find, again, bits and pieces of truth all over the place. But I find every institution, everywhere you look, is seems specifically designed to keep you away from making that connection. Now, that's the one thing. And I mean, if I were to get back into my understanding of what this battle looks like, right? And so that's kind of this. Uh, well, that would be a conversation I'd love to have with you at some point. Is that, like, how I see this thing happening, and it's and how it got started and where we are now. It's I would say it's consistent with the teachings of the Bible, right? But it's not the story that Christians tell, right? They have a different take on it. I guess I would say I have a different take on it, but it makes sense to me. It's the way I understand it, and it makes sense, right? So it seems like it's a fairly engaged thing. It takes, I mean, I started talking to you when you and I visited in person over the Thanksgiving holiday, right? I kind of shared with you a little bit about the beginning and the way I saw that started, and that but ultimately, we have this enemy who hates us, and the reason he hates us basically is that he hates the Father, because he was jealous, and he was jealous of us, and so the Creator gave us a position that he felt as a superior being, that he did not want to give us. Well, again, he made this whole world and he gave it to us, and he didn't feel like that was fair. And we were made in his image, and we got also the power to create life, and he doesn't have that. And so he refused to give honor to man and to serve man, and he felt that that was beneath him. And so that, it was pride really that was his, if you want to say sin, but that was his falling, is that he was too prideful, and so he disobeyed. And then when he disobeyed, Dad said, okay, we have a problem here, right? And he became separate from him. You're now in battle, right? You now have this battle. And so basically, when the word comes that now you're going to die, well, now we get this legal argument, right? And so this is where I see that really the legal profession comes from the enemy. This whole thing of going, okay, so if you give us free will, right, and then so we have the power to choose, but then we choose to not be in relationship with you, then we die. That's not really free will. That's slavery, right? And from God's position, it is. But if you disconnect from the source of power, right, you're going to die. If you unscrew the light bulb and it has no source of power, it goes into darkness, right? So if you disobey, not say disobey, if you reject perfection, then you become imperfect, right? So you can't reject perfection and create a second kind of perfection or your own personal perfection. And
Well, there you go. That's, that's the, I guess, kind of the what the left hand path is kind of like, shooting for, or what I hear those who tell me that's what they
that's my
pursue.
understanding of it. Yeah.
Right, they tell me that they're like that God is real, but God's imperfect, and that they are headed towards, or they're working towards becoming their own gods so that they can be more perfect. I don't know, in God's place, or
Well,
with similar admin privileges,
that's
but you and I have talked about this. I don't think I'd make a very good god.
I would suck at it because I'd be out smiting people, right?
No,
I would be
it would
smiting the
take
fuck out
like
of people.
14 hours or something at the most, you know? On the first day, you and I would "Oh, man, okay, I'm just gonna help out all the homeless children," and then we'd be like, you know what? Those motherfuckers, dude, those people, those Luciferians that were out there raping the kids, we need to really show them what's up." And then that would extrapolate into a whole new fear and guilt control matrix.
No, that's I agree with that. And again, I have said many times that I would make a really crappy god because I would be out smiting, all kinds of smiting, but ultimately this is where I think, when you get to the idea of the forbidden fruit in the book of Genesis and what's called the fall, the original sin. I think there is some profound truth there, right? It's called the tree, not the tree of knowledge, and that's the Prometheus story, right? That gets flipped upside down and says, oh, he got in trouble because he was trying that God was trying to keep man ignorant. And so Lucifer, Prometheus, Mercury, whoever you want to name it, that he helped mankind. He was the good guy, right? And he's helping mankind out by giving him knowledge, and that's how he got in trouble. Now, that's a lie. The tree is not called the tree of knowledge; it's called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it's interesting. The lie there is not that you will become like gods, because it says very quickly in the start of the next chapter, chapter 4, it says that God spoke to himself, and it's interesting. And they said, now that he's done this, he's become as one of us, knowing good from evil. But what I see as the result is immediately we began to point the finger, right? So God shows up in the garden and says, hey, where are you? What I find really interesting is that he never asked the question why. He says, where are you, Adam? Where are you? And Adam immediately answers why. He makes excuses. I heard you, and I was afraid because I was naked. Who? He doesn't say why. Who told you you were naked? Well, what happened? Right. So again, never why. What happened? He points the finger. This woman you made me. She gave me this fruit, and I did eat it. And then he says to the woman, "What happened? Is this true?" Again, never asked why. And she says, "The snake. You made the serpent. It's your fault. So he never does ask why, and they always answer with the why. They make excuses from the beginning, but immediately what I see, this is the way I see it, is that the knowledge of good and evil, and we have become our own God, right? So instead of relying on His wisdom and understanding, to give us wisdom, we have taken the place of God, and that we now judge everyone. So all the ways of a man are clean in his own eyes. And so we justify all of our own actions and all of our own behaviors, and we put ourselves in the position of the hero's journey. We are the hero, and we're the god of our own story. And in fact, most people who are serial killers, that is exactly their story, is they want the power of life and death. They thrill on the power of being able to take life. It makes them like God. And even doctors will say that they get very narcissistic, many of them, because they have power of life and death. But for all of us, we take a position of God, and we begin to judge other people based on how we relate it to ourselves, and we. In doing so, we even judge God. How could a loving God let babies die of cancer? Right. So we judge him, and we say, if that's the kind of God it is, and I can't serve a God like that. But you don't understand. In order to understand him, you would have to have total perspective, and frankly, you don't. Right. So without being able to see everything and completely understanding the circumstances, you don't know. And that's where, again, I see the relationship is necessary, and to trust him. And when you trust and know that he is good in all circumstances, then it doesn't matter. I can answer those questions for me, right? I can't answer them for anybody else, and go, why do bad things happen to good people, right? It, it, it doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't matter. I know shitty things are going to happen, and shitty things happen to good people. Shitty things happen to bad people. Shitty things happen because we're in a world that's busted, and so it's screwed up. Why doesn't he come fix it? Well, because again, he made it for us, and he made us ruler of it. And that title of kingship and ruler over it got taken from us. We ceded it to the enemy. And then if he took it back and fixed it, it would never have been a gift to begin with.
Well,
You,
it's like
you give someone a
if your
house.
kid goes and fucks off or messes up, if your kid goes and makes poor decisions, and then they come to you, and you could be a wealthy and generous father or mother, benefactor, and if they say, hey, I made all these poor decisions, if you just say, okay, I'll bail you out of all your debt, and I'll pay for any reparations you need to make, and I got it. I don't know. I don't think that really is a good steward of
Right.
your life.
I mean, if I were to just quickly try to draw a metaphor, to be like, you have a wealthy parent, and they buy they have a house built for you. It's this beautiful house, and so they give you this home, and you're a fuck off, and so you take a loan out on the house, right? And you get a line of equity, you gamble, you lose the house, and it goes into mortgage. And they come and repossess it. So now you go, oh, help me, right? How come you're not fixing it? Well, okay, so you already signed over the deed, right? I gave you the deed, and now the bank is coming to take it. So that's one issue. And now there is, in spite of that, he has made a way out, and he said, hey, I tell you what, I paid for, I bought this, but in order for it to, you just have to accept it. That's all you have to do is accept it. No,
It's an RSVP, is what I tell people.
that's
Is
not good.
that's my understanding. And the new covenant is it's an invitation, and if you want to come, you need to in advance say, I'll be there. Okay, thanks."
Well, the
You don't
hard
even have to say thanks.
Well, the
Just
hard part for most people is that this is where they get really uncomfortable. Is a lot of people are okay with the idea of God, but when it comes to Jesus, they get really uncomfortable with that. And it strikes me as interesting because it's like, again, I find it odd that a lot of people go, um, Jesus was a good man. He's a teacher, all this sort of stuff. Well, that's not what the book says. So according to what the Bible says, he said he was the Son of God, and he said he was here for a specific thing. And he said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." So either he was insane, or he was a liar. But he couldn't have been just a prophet or a good man, because if he was either insane or he was a liar. They're really, or he was who he said he was. Those are the only three options. He either was who he was insane, or he was a liar. And those are really the only three things that can come out of that. So, but people get really uncomfortable. They go, well, then it's the only door. And so they get butthurt with the idea that they have to accept a gift, and to say, yes, I believe that you did this, Jesus. And so that's my way to become in relationship with God. That's what meets that's what pays off that mortgage that got put on the house, right? Even if like you didn't specifically do it, people get really uncomfortable with that, and that's just something you gotta, I guess, work out for yourself. But again, the biggest things I find that people get that keeps them away. They either get distracted, or they judge God. They hear a bunch of things about him that they don't like, and so they go, I could never, serve a God like that. I could never be in a relationship with a God that would do all these horrible things that the Catholic Church did or whatever. Or they get, the pride thing gets them. They don't want to feel like they're a slave or a servant, or they get really uncomfortable with this Jesus thing, and they think it's just, it's unacceptable that there should be only one path. Well, what about Muslims? Look, again, for that, it pretty much says clearly, don't worry about that, right? Don't don't the servant shouldn't worry about what the master is doing. Just let all that go. You don't. It's not your job to figure it out, right? That's the I guess the easiest way to put this, the one of the best things that's happened in my relationship with him is to stop trying to figure those things out. Because honestly, now again, I'm not saying you have to shut your brain off, because it's not a brainless. Um, I'm not turning my brain off and going, everything you say is good.
Right.
That's not. Now, ultimately, I came to a place of going, everything he says is good, but that came through trust built over time in
Well,
my
it's
relationship with him.
discernment. It's not, it's not like it's not open to criticism. It's not like
Oh, I've
he's
shut.
saying, just take my word for it. But you get to a point where, like, if you tell me something, I don't, I'm not gonna go and fact check everything before
Yeah, well,
I,
because we have a
I
relationship,
publish
right?
it. I'm gonna say I take Baldini's word for it. But you get to a further point with, I guess, kind of this divine energy where ideally, the people that I see that are living the godly life that I would, I guess, kind of aspire to, I'd like to live more like that. Um, oh fuck, I forgot what I was saying.
That's okay. But I mean, with your relationship thing, right? It's the same way with, with my wife. Is like, I trust her implicitly. Like, this is the best relationship I've ever had. In terms of a romantic relationship in my wife and in my life, and the one of the biggest aspects to it, and for both of us, going both ways, is that we implicitly trust that the other person loves us. Right? I don't have to worry about, does she love me, or is she going to hurt me, or is she going to be selfish or do something, is she going to stab me in the back? I never have to worry about that, right? I know for sure that she loves me. And it's the same, that is the same way it is with my relationship with the divine, is that I know for sure my relationship, my experience with him, is that I know for sure that he loves me. And so I don't have to question that. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't on numerous occasions shook my fist and just screamed at him, like here's a conversation I had with him. I like, does this amuse you? Does my pain and suffering, is this the kind of God you are, that you want me to suffer, that my pain and suffering is some kind of amusement to you? Like, do something, show me you love me, do something, fix this, I hurt. And his response was, and what if I do nothing?
Dude, he didn't even
That's a
respond to
rough
me.
that's a
Uh,
rough thing to
he
say.
might have he might have said that, but maybe I wasn't listening because I was expecting some, like, divine intervention. Um, and God was just like, stasis mode.
Yeah.
Then what? You want me to do something? I'll do something. I'll make sure you can figure this out. I'll provide you with the opportunity to exercise the divine nature that I've put in you, but I'm not gonna, like, sort it all out for you.
And there are times that he has, right, sorted things out. But in that set of circumstances, man, I felt like that was really cruel, a cruel thing to respond. And what if I do nothing? What then? Right? I mean, but really, my response at the moment was that it broke me, and I said, where else am I going to go? Right? Like, I've already been down that path so far that I know where it ends, and so I've got nothing else but to hang on to you. And really, Russell, from that, in that moment, what I felt like, it was almost a physical, visceral experience of like a tree being planted next to, well, it was like next to a river, right? But your roots go down into rock, like right, like it's in rock. Nothing ever was going to ever shake uh my devotion and into this relationship, right? That um and from that moment that I knew I could trust, um, it has been unshakable since then. Now there have been um, the worst parts of my life have come thereafter in terms of comfort and ease, and all the things that we want as people. I think it has been the most difficult, painful um, suffering. On the other hand, as we talked about before, and as you alluded to, it is this suffering that gives me an understanding and a sense of compassion for those who suffer. And I know how to sit with them in silence and to hurt with them. I don't have to tell them this is part of some greater plan, or that it's God's will for you, or that time heals all wounds, or bullshit, any of that stuff. Um, they don't want to hear it, and it just hurts. But I've been through it, and I know what it feels like, and it hurts. And really weirdly, that is the promise of what Jesus said, right? Is that he never said it was going to be easy. In fact, he said specifically, if you follow me, the world is going to hate you. There will be troubles, right? But he said, but I will never leave you or forsake you. And that has been my experience of being truth, is that it doesn't make it easy, but he didn't promise it'd be easy. In fact, he promised it would be hard, but that he would never leave us, and he hasn't, right? And so, but that suffering that I have encountered has given me certainly an outlook, right, of what things are important. It's certainly prioritized things in my life. Having lost everything that I've owned at least 3 times, and become, this close to homeless. And I mean, for all practical purposes, homeless. We didn't have any running water. I mean, it was. I mean, we were in a crappy trailer, mold-filled trailer. I mean, it was horrible. And for a long period of time, not much like a weekend, but like a year. So homeless for all intents and purposes. But I
Yeah.
never, I never stopped trusting, and he never let us down, and he never let us go hungry completely. And um, you know, uh, but he was always there. There was that comfort, right? And that sense of comfort and peace. And so I guess that's the way I can describe. There's a peace that comes in knowing that I can trust him. And so that gives me the ability to help comfort others, and to see the the deep wounding and pain of others. And what I understand in terms of love is that is the most needed thing in our world, amongst humanity, is what every person desperately wants and needs, is love and acceptance. And that's what they're really trying as hard as they can to get through the most fucked up means possible, because they don't know even what it is. It's something that they crave and they desire. It's a hunger that can't be filled, but they try really hard, and that's what people want really badly. And so that's the only thing that I can give to them, is love. And it's valuable, and it's real. And the only way that I get it is to get it from my dad, right? And so that's my experience of um, the only way that I understood what it really was to experience it from him, and the way that he loves and accepts me. And then that gives me the ability to do it for others. And so that's the only thing I have to give to others, right? Is this ability to care for them, and to not judge them, and think that, oh, you did all this bad stuff, so you're an asshole and you're going to go burn in hell forever. That's bullshit. That's
Right.
nothing to do with anything going on, right? Everybody does fucked up shit, and we do fucked up shit because we're afraid, right? The opposite of love is fear.
Yep. Yep. And so here, then that's a great place to I want to like maybe I'm going to provide a few little thoughts here, and then we can maybe kind of sum this up, because I
Yep.
think we've had a good conversation here. That's not like it's not like I didn't set out here to praise God, but through our interaction, i- if anything, I came into this kind of thinking like, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to let Baldini talk about his experience with God, and then I'll talk about how God has fucked me over.
Okay.
And then as I talked to you more, I realized like, you know what, perhaps that's not the way it is. And either way, I can have those conversations. I can go find heathens, there's people who would be happy to commiserate with me on the evil, fallen, Luciferian state of the world and how we're just doing the best we can, pursuing our own,
I can have that same conversation with you. The world is
oh,
fucked up and evil, right? And I've been fucked over by it too. The only thing.
but what I'm saying is I wanna have a conversation about how the world is fucked up and evil, but I wanna take it to something that's, covert harassment and gang stalking, and maybe what is that? Is that a straight up manifestation of Satan? Because I think it might be, but here I wanna sum it up so that we can like kind of leave folks with a positive takeaway or something that's you know
Sure.
it makes sense to me about God. So a friend of mine, Chad, said, we were talking about God, and he said, "These conversations are just conversational to me." And he was like, people will say, "I swear to God that God looks like a lion." And then others will be like, "No, that's a fucking dog." But it's either way, it's God. And then he said he calls us to act, not just go evangelize. And he said, "Be a Christian, but don't go out and judge." And then this is the good maxim, the good edict that I thought you would vibe with. He said, "You're supposed to inspire Christianity, not go out and preach it."
Oh yeah, my whole thing is again, I'm not very evangelistic at all. I mean, when I've talked to you in this conversation, I've spent more time talking about God to somebody else than I have in a year. um,
Oh, for
but
sure. Yeah,
most people don't they don't want to hear it, and I don't. I mean, we're talking because you asked, right? And so and you're willing to listen, and certainly I like talking about my friend because I love him, but I'm not trying to again convince anybody or evangelize. I'm very again, it's not up to me what somebody else believes or wants to believe, or again, to me, it's a relationship. So how can I'm not going to play matchmaker, right?
that's
If you're
what.
in,
So yeah, my mom always says God's in the relationship business.
yeah,
Like he's not in the like book writing business.
you know,
That's
he's not in.
that's
I don't even see him. It's like in the judging business, right? It's not. He's in the healing business. That's what I would say is that he is in the business of healing hearts, and is a friend to the brokenhearted, and it's but what happens is that we get to be like that, like the beat down dog who, when somebody comes and tries to pet him and be nice to him, they snarl and bite because that's the only thing they know is being beaten, right? And so they reject the loving hand because all they know is being beaten, and then that is really I mean that is really the experience of most people. Give me just a moment here, Russ. I'm just going to run away for a second and then come
that's
right back.
fine. You
um,
take your
you
time.
you
I'll
had
be right
that's
back. I'm gonna go do something. I'll see you in a sec.
yeah, you had some questions. So anyway, I'm going to pause the recording here and
Cool.
so yeah, I wanted to say that I feel a little bad, and that I really didn't mean to take this off into this big Jesus God conversation, right? We were going to talk about sort of like moral relativism and stuff like we talked about last time, in some ways I kind of can't help but talk about my friend. Yeah, anybody, yeah, if you're willing to listen, whatever. But again, um, that wasn't my intention to go that way. Although if it serves some purpose and is helpful and gives some perspective um, on who I see this person to be, then hey, great, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I don't feel like you derailed it because if I did, I would have got in there. But you know, I'm just trying to have a conversation with the smartest human I know. Um,
Did you
and
invite somebody else here? Wait.
you're right. But it's not like it's not that I think that he knows what's up to an extent where I'd be like, "Oh, fuck, man, he wants to talk about Jesus now. I guess I'll just sit down and just listen and pray and hope that I can absorb this wisdom." No, I was into it because I honestly think that it's something that our listeners will uh, people will get. they'll get the takeaway. The takeaway here is we're not really talking about Jesus particularly. We're talking about good and love and righteousness. And those things are exemplified
To
in
me, God
the
and
Bible and in our personal experiences. So,
yeah, to me, God and love are inseparable, right? You can't get them apart. And so, if I'm going to talk about love, I can't help but talk about, Dad, because that is to me again the very definition. He is the very definition of what love is, in every aspect. And so, I can't separate the two.
right. So are you do you have a minute to talk about some covert harassment? Just
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean,
we can stop whenever you don't.
yeah,
But
I can give you a few more minutes. I'm an early riser, right? So it's getting a little late, but we did start late. So, um,
yeah.
with that in mind, so yeah, yeah. Go shoot, go.
So do what and there's no wrong answers here, but how familiar are you with, I guess, kind of the gangs.
Targeted individual gang stalking stuff.
Yes. That meme, that idea.
Only a little bit. When I first encountered it, like most conspiracies, I thought it was just batshit crazy. But then I started actually. Then I saw a couple of people who were making YouTube videos on the topic, and they didn't seem crazy. Some of the stuff they said seemed a little crazy, and it seemed
Oh,
like,
for
okay,
sure.
maybe you're super paranoid. But then, as I begin to pay attention to it and what they were saying, so what's the guy's name? Is it Jerry Marzowski? There's a guy he worked in clinical psychology and worked for state mental hospitals for like 20 years, and he worked with psychotics and schizophrenics, and people who hear voices, and they're trained, the psychologists are, they're trained to tell the people that that's just the voices inside their head, that it's just their bad part. But he started listening to them and asking them questions, and found that the things that the voices had very consistent, similar. It seemed like not just somebody's voice inside their head, like it was an external entity. He got in a lot of trouble because they were like, you never give credence to the idea that there's an actual somebody talking to them, right? Because that's
Right. They probably told him he was co-signing their bullshit.
yeah, pretty much. And but he uh, in listening to him and reading some of what he has to say, and then my experience with people who have, and again, for lack of a better term, um, demon possession. Again, for me, it's very real. I've seen it and experienced it. I'm going to go any
Yeah.
further than that, but there does seem to be the ability of these multidimensional beings to overlay their will on top of a human, or other living being, even. And so, um, here's some so with this idea of gang stalking, right? It seems like absolutely nuts, and if you look at it from a logistic perspective, it doesn't make any sense, except when you start to take into this account. And so I've had some experiences, and I went, hey, wait a minute, right? So, like, in my experience, there's from the, I guess, the Christian point of view or whatever, there's a term that people sometimes use. It's like a divine appointment, right? Where you meet somebody, the synchronistic moment where you meet somebody right at the right time, or the exact person, or they might say something to you that's so perfect for that, like it can only have come from God or whatever. Like they spoke to you as though God was speaking to you through that person. Well, conversely, I've had absolutely experiences where, I would say, the enemy spoke through somebody that's on his team, right? Sold out to them, where he said, that person said something to me that they could have never have known, that was targeting me, right? So if you get this idea, and I think this is also consistent with the idea of, for example, all the gematria and numerology in these events, and how closely coordinated and synchronized they seem to be, is that, when I look at the construct of the world, and this big, all these conspiracies, it seems so well put together. One of the things that immediately comes to mind is that, this is not the work of men, right? It goes over
Yeah.
so many generations, and so
Boom.
tightly
That
controlled. that these people, that the men who are involved are simply doing their bidding, doing the bidding of others who are, for all practical purposes, what we would consider immortal, right? And they're super smart. So
Right, they don't, like, organize things in a fashion that would make sense to us, where, like, if you and I were trying to, harvest fear or do something, we would try to do it in a more, like, kinda practical way.
yeah, and
Um,
the other thing too is that the patience that they show, right? So they'll do things over 6 or 7, 8 lifetimes, and people,
it's like Matt talks about,
yeah, yeah,
he's
matters
like,
of conscience, yeah.
right, he's like, "Nobody here is, it's not like these people are erecting, huge buildings to tear them down, knowing I will almost certainly die before this event comes to completion. It's not like they're doing that because they think they're gonna die and go. They're serving something.
Yes,
They're serving.
and they're
It's
getting
not a
something out of it.
human
Yeah.
agenda.
And so the way I view it is that they get, that they sign up for this, right? So they get some sense of temporal power and pleasure or whatever, in exchange for do these things. And so these things, whatever, they're passing a message or doing this, or whacking this guy, or writing this book or whatever, right? And so to them, they just did this one thing. It's the accumulation of these things over time that really is the bigger picture, right? And so and the fact that all these bases are covered, and there seems to be, supernatural knowledge and all this sort of stuff. So if you look at it from a perspective of there's somebody else behind the scenes pulling the strings, that there really is supernatural powers of light and darkness in battle, and sort of using people as pawns, I mean, especially on the left side or the dark side, using people as pawns to, hey, if sort of like the mafia, right? So the mafia exists beyond the lifetime of just one people. It's a families, right? So it goes over time, and they build this power and control and that sort of stuff. So if you look at it from that aspect, then it begins to make more sense that there is a plan, a long-term goal, a long-term plan. From my perspective, again, if I go to the point of going, if you're literally talking about the Shaitan, right? Satan, Beelzebub, whoever, right? Again, going back to the idea that he rejected God, and made this argument that, if we exercise our free will, then that's not really freedom, and so that's sort of the argument, and it sort of makes sense in a legal term, but it rejects, again, love and power. It rejects perfection in preference of imperfection, but my will be done, right? So and so the feeling that he was going to be punished, right, and it would cost him his life or whatever, he decided, just like a bad boyfriend or whatever, saying, if I can't have you, nobody will. Like, I'm going to get you back by hurting you because you love these beings, and I'm going to take as many of them with me into destruction as I can. And so that's his goal. Is It's a numbers game. He feels that the more people, he's going to hurt God by killing his children, because God loves his children, and so that's his goal, is to kill as many as he can, and to cause excruciating pain to the Father. So with that in mind, again, this is his goal, is to get as many people with him into destruction as possible. And so
Uh-huh.
and so one of the things that I see is that, for example, people wonder how, let's go with predictive programming, right? The Simpsons television show shows all this stuff, and like, wow, did they really put all this 9/11 things in all these shows? And the most recent, Kobe Bryant, right? The helicopter crash,
Yeah,
right? So
10 years
yeah,
before.
right. So is that, did somebody plan that well in advance? Well, you could say that, but here's another aspect, and I think if you consider it this way, is that those who are, let's say, you're living a life and you're not really, you make a deal with the devil, but let's say you did. Let's say you're part of OTO, right? Ordo Templi Orientis, or you're part of Masonic Lodge, whatever. Whether
Golden Dawn, yeah,
yeah,
whatever.
whether you are or not, or let's just say that you're just living, you're just living your best life, but that's in rejection of all things good, right? Your left hand path, whatever. You're in it for yourself. But you know, you get inspired, right, to write a book, or hey, this would be a great idea. Is I'll put this Kobe Bryant helicopter thing. Wouldn't that be funny, right? So the inspiration came from someone else, um, who then you didn't, again, you weren't part of the plan. You just executed it because you got this great inspiration, this idea that came from outside. It's like the best idea. I wrote this song, right? Stairway to Heaven, away. You know, like, so you get this
Yeah.
inspiration. And so all that, to get back here, you ask about the targeted individual and that sort of thing, is that so if you think of it in terms of not like government spooks who are chasing you with black helicopters and doing all this stuff, but what if instead it were your real enemy, right? Who is interdimensional, has an amazing amount of insight into human nature, and can whisper into the ears of anybody who is, I would say, kind of within their control to one degree or another.
Right,
Um,
how's an army? Not just a large task force,
yes.
a literal an army.
A literal army, and only just even for a moment. All it takes is just that to go, hey, say this to this guy, or follow this guy, or this guy,
Yep.
he's bugging you, right? And so it just put it into your heart to be like, I'm gonna fuck with this guy, right? Like,
Right,
this guy bugs me. I'm gonna just fuck with him. I don't know why. It just, I just got a moment of rage. I just fucking hate this guy, right?
right,
And it only 2 or 3 minutes. But when you're the target of that on the other side, right? So you can encounter 30 people in a row, right? Who all are expressing and venting rage and hate at you, right? So what would it feel like if you're the person who's on the, so for 30 people, they experience 2.5 to 3 minutes of rage toward one person. They didn't even know why. They just got a bug up their ass, right? And then it's over. It's done. I fucked with this guy. Hey, Bobby, I fucked with this guy real good,
right,
man. He's in the Starbucks. I just said, fuck you, man.
right,
Asshole. Right? Hey, that was so funny. That was great. Right. But there's 30 stories of that. Yeah, I fucked with this guy. He's just bugged me, man. But the guy who's on the other end of it, he gets 30 people in a row all day long, right, that are expressing hatred toward him. So he is the
right.
targeted individual. Why do people get chosen to be targeted individuals? I mean, shit, fuck if I know, dude. I mean, certainly my experience is that anybody who is trying to legitimately follow the way is going to be targeted that way, because again, the words of Jesus, if they hated me, they're going to, how much more are they going to hate you? Right?
Right.
You're not getting out of this for free. So in that sense, I would certainly say that there's that. I also think that, as you said, the harvest of fear and that sort of stuff. When I see fear porn, and the tactics of the enemy, they do seem to just delight in our suffering. And so, as much suffering as they can create seems to be their goal. And so, if they can get people to suffer and find people who are susceptible and sensitive to it, and try to drive people crazy, right? And might there be an element of MK Ultra programming, or government agencies who are doing this stuff? Absolutely. Again, but they might be just under the same sort of like inspiration, right?
Dude, they don't like this is the thing. This is the real reality breakdown to me, because we could talk about the mud floods, or how they build this shit. How the fuck did they build this shit? How did they build the pyramids? It don't make no sense, right? But we can actively watch this is happening to people that are like, I could dismiss if it was just people that were mentally ill and just drug addicts and stuff, or if I couldn't see this happening myself when I was not on any drugs, and when I was really taking a super careful look at it and trying to be discerning and going, I don't want to buy into paranoia.
Mhm.
Um, it's not fucking possible. Nobody has the infrastructure to carry out 30-man operations on one fucking homeless tweaker.
Yep.
They don't, because they're also carrying out 30-man operations on a bunch of other people, homeless tweakers, professors.
Sure. But then again, when you say it's not just the, drug addicts or mentally ill, but as I said, perhaps those people are just the most susceptible to it, right? So if you're
Oh, it's for sure. It's
so if you're a drug
targeted.
addict, yeah, then you're susceptible to it, or you're mentally ill. You're going to be susceptible to that sort of harassment, and so again, they're feeding off of our suffering. I mean, flip it around. Imagine this, right? So you're 150,000 years old, right? Most people are bored. They don't know what to do on a Sunday afternoon. You know that you're gonna your life is going to end in a horrible ending, and the cause of your suffering is these meat bags running around, right? And they're the object of your suffering's affection, right? He loves these things, right? These little meat bags, and you're just the only joy isn't even the right word. The only sensation you can even get anymore is torture, right? You're like a psychotic kid torturing animals, right? It's like I think that's where that comes from, And when people go, "Oh, the devil made me do it," or that sort of stuff, I'm like, I don't necessarily discount that, right? That people can be influenced. I mean, I say this again with shame, going at times when I was young, I gave myself over to darkness, and um, I was influenced to do some bad things, right? Imagine if you just, from my perspective, I imagine if I did that consistently throughout my life and grew not only accustomed to it but thrilled in it. Um, I think this is largely where some of this stuff comes from, Russell. I think you're hitting the nail on the head with, yeah. Again, logistically, it would be impossible for these things to occur. But if you're looking at it from a spiritual perspective, that there is an enemy who delights in the suffering of mankind and just bullying, picking on people, right? And tearing apart their mind and making them crazy, and making them feel crazy, just causing them to suffer. Um, I, I think there is something to it. Again, when I first encountered the idea of targeted individuals, I thought it was nuts, but I don't think so anymore. I think that some people. I mean, I've felt throughout my life that I wore a spiritual target T-shirt. Right, like I was getting hit with all these arrows constantly, and in the last few years, it certainly seems sometimes seems that way. And I'm that I know of, I'm not nuts. I mean, I don't display other other presentations of it. Uh, you know,
Right.
fairly normal person in terms of that hold a job and all that sort of stuff, um
Yeah.
but I do contemplate these things, and I watch and I observe this stuff closely. So yes, I think that you're pondering this stuff. I do think that is to me the most likely scenario. It does seem as if so many people are describing such a similar thing. It seems ludicrous to dismiss it as just mental illness or a meme,
Right.
right?
It,
It's too consistent. It's too um, again. There's too many evidences of it. So when I
right.
preponderance of
It
the evidence
kind
together,
right. And so here's ah, f- fuck. I spaced out, but it's this is what I think, I'm kind of partial to watching, and Brian Staveley has shown a lot of the demon chemtrail footage
uh-huh.
where these planes they're clearly not. Some of these things that are spraying the trails are clearly aircraft,
Mhm.
but then some of them are like disappearing,
Yep.
reappearing, kind of parts of them are phasing out.
Yeah, Crow 777 got a bunch of orbs doing it, right? So it's weird.
Yeah, and like to me that right there, that when there's stuff like that going on in the sky and we can see that and we can't really explain that, but I don't know why it surprises people that there's things going on Earth that are completely inexplicable in that same manner.
Yeah, there's been a number of reports recently. Well, I say recently in the last decade or so, but certainly with increasing frequency, people who are uh, y- you know sorry, I was distracted by a message that came in. But so seeing things in the sky now, there's levitating humanoids that are shape shifting, and some of them are glowing, right? And there's some videos of it that are pretty compelling. What do you make of that? It's like, well, certainly it certainly looks, I mean, video these days could be CGI or whatever, but some of it, um, the method in which it was captured and the consistency again with which these, I mean, again, you can go back to stuff like I put a lot of cryptozoology, Wendigo, and Bigfoot, and this sort of stuff. I think are probably the same thing. I think these are the Native Americans saw them as dark spirits that harassed mankind. Why not? Why should we dismiss it? Right? I mean, I think that again with our modern society that we are in the quote age of reason. I think it's unreasonable. Right? I think it's we lost our mind when we lost our spirit and our connection to the earth and things spiritual, into the spiritual aspects of ourselves, and it literally made us crazy, right? And similarly, the idea that as humankind seeks and needs stability, and for as far as I can tell, more 12 to 1500, 2000 years. Again, I don't buy the timeline that they sell us, but for long periods of time, things never really changed, right? They did the farming and agrarian and culture stayed the same. There was very little change, and now change has really psychologically been proven over and over again to be bad. It's I say bad. It's traumatic. It's stressful. Any change, especially big change, and now we've come to an age where within my lifetime we've gone from change on a decades long period of time to every year to every few months to now daily. There's enormous amounts of change such that the human mind really can't cope and grasp with this level of consistent and the only again the only thing that's consistent is the change. It literally makes us psychotic, and add to that all the efforts that the mainstream media and the cabal has done to us with fear porn and what they do with news and what they do with these false events. It's designed to make people mentally unstable. We have no built-in stability. There is no way to be at peace. We don't have it, right? And our peace and love and our connection with things spiritual has been stolen from us, along with our history and our understanding of who and what we are. And I think that is one of the biggest things that is hidden from us, is not just our history, but who we are. That we are powerful, and we are, again, in some ways, the most important thing. Um,
Oh, for sure. And it's like Matt talks about, and although, I sometimes I'll watch him and I owe a great deal to Quantum of Conscience in terms of like thinking big, uh, in terms of getting me to think about shit.
yeah,
But
it's a spectacular level of abductive reasoning, right?
for
Working
sure,
out.
absolutely, teleologically,
Yep.
like just off the chain.
Yep.
But he says, you know, if we watch Jurassic Park, there's a huge truth drop. There's a freaking gigantic, scary beast that could just eat everyone who owns the park and kill them. And they put it in a fucking huge cage. Um, a huge cage. And I can't remember what he says, but long story short, is like they wouldn't put us in this cage if we weren't powerful enough to break out of it.
Bingo. Yeah, we wouldn't be the target um, of their hatred, right? If we were nothing. And what is the biggest tale right now? Like, what is um, the heliocentric model? And you're made of stardust, and you're a speck on a speck on a speck on a speck. The whole message is you're insignificant, you're nothing. And
Right.
you combine that with nihilism, that there is no meaning to anything. What's the point, right? And there is no point. And so the whole message is you're worthless, it's meaningless, and you're nothing. If that is the primary message, and you know that the people who are telling you the message are liars, Turn it on its head. You're powerful, you're important, and you're valuable.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you weren't, you wouldn't be the target for suffering.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good kinda, way to, to approach this is, like, as an empowering struggle rather than something that, like, strips us of all our essential bits in our humanity where we're just degraded through this process until we're, just a shell, just a speck of stardust.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't think that that's the takeaway that I think for the higher minded individual here is we are important. You are important. I am important. We are capable of great change, probably far greater than we would ever give ourselves credit for. With faith of a mustard seed, we could move mountains. Um,
I mean, I think that to me, the truth is that you literally are made in the image of the Creator. And so you bear within you still the imprint of the divine spark, and that you are, in a way, divine. And to me, the in fact, the whole way magic works, right, is that this universe, this place, was designed in such a way as to manifest your will, provided that is within the confines of the way, the instructions, the operating system, right? And in order to get it to do bad things, it requires extra special, help, and that's where magic comes in, right? But we have been taken away from that. But I think that we were designed to be to have dominion. That we are. Even Bible says, "Know you not that you are God's?" Right? If you're the Son of God and you are made in His image, then that is an enormous amount of power that we're pissing away, most of us, and in trying to become, apotheosis and to make our own God, but without any power, right? So we're getting the power from something that is doomed, right? From your enemy, your mortal enemy. Um, so I don't know. I do think that the empowering thing here is that although you may feel like you're in a world of shit, and it is a pretty shitty world out there, it wouldn't be that way if you weren't, nobody tries to steal something that's not valuable, right? And if they're trying to steal your soul, then there's value there, or they wouldn't put that much effort into it.
and it wouldn't be like clearly, I mean, if you step away from kind of the monetary or like I guess kind of like 3D concerns that the modern world kind of has us in that we worry about. If you step away from that, you find that the real concern is basically our eternal spirit. It's something that's far, far more impactful and important than
Absolutely. I fully agree with that, Russ. I think that is the key. And here's one that again I'll attribute this to Matt. He said it brilliantly. That again, working at it backwards and using abductive reasoning, he came to this: the meaning of life is to discover that life has meaning.
boom.
That was terrific, right? So I would just, encourage people with that and to go that there is, it is not valueless and it is not unimportant, and but you cannot ignore what's going on around you, and though you may try to dismiss it, um, there's too many of us to tell you that there is something real out there, and again, I found my way is to follow the way, right? Somebody else's way, but whatever path you choose to get there, there is the spiritual connection is super important. Again, for me, there's a really great path to get there because it's love connected. But however you see it, uh, again, I encourage you everyone to find that part of yourself that is connected to the divine, and understand that you are so important and have such a value, that you have an enemy trying to steal it from you. And above all else, guard your heart, for from it come the wellspring of life.
Yeah, and that's, going to school, I find that, what young people are guarding themselves against are things that are, like, they're way out of their control. I mean, they're out of my control.
Yeah.
They're out of I don't know anyone who's affecting race relations.
Or anybody who's like, oh, climate change. Yeah, good luck with that, buddy.
Yeah, for sure. And they're worried as hell about these things, but then if I tell them, "You're an immortal spirit being, and you're playing a game that's it's 100 times more advanced than what you do, what kind of fuel you burn in your car,
Yeah,
or what kinda sodas you drink, or what cans they're in, or if you put them in, in glass jugs made out of recycled sand."
right.
And but that's where we're at, and I think that's where we can find real liberation, is in identifying, what are we really doing here? What are we struggling against, and what are we struggling with? And I think as truth evolves, I find that more and more people are coming to a middle ground. I talk to fewer and fewer people who are worried about the shape of the earth these days. And there's still a ton of us care about it, but, um,
Kind of like a
people
gateway
are.
drug.
What's that?
It's kind of like a gateway drug for a lot of people. It helped them realize that if the shape of the earth is not what they told us, it looks like a constructed place, which means that there is a creator, right? And that changed their viewpoint. So it's kind of like a gateway drug, in terms of that spiritual awakening, maybe for a number of people. So it becomes less important as its own end, but important as in it's a uh, it's a certainly a powerful indicator of the nature and the size of the deception, right? This overarching deception of history, um, and um, and again, who you are, what you are, and where you are, right? So everything about you has been a lie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a whole bag of tricks, buddy.
All right, so
I'm
let's
glad.
get back to that first question you asked before we started recording, and I'll ask you that question. If someone told you the truth, would you believe them?
Ooh, m probably not. Uh, quite honestly, like, I I might come into agreement with it later based on my own experience, but I'm not sure. I'm so skeptical of anyone telling me anything that I might not be able to digest it. Um, I don't know. I feel like that might be the wrong answer,
Uh, I
but
don't I don't think, I mean, at least you're thinking about it. I think my instinct is that, because I was gonna say before I asked that question that, it's been said that in a world full of lies, those who speak the truth, become hated, right? When people love the lie, they hate those who speak the truth. And in today's, from what I see in the modern life, it is all about the lie. And when they say speak your truth, what they mean is make your own shit up, and then people can't argue with you, right? So a man can become a woman, people can become an alien. I identify as a dinosaur, right? Okay,
right,
but you're a hater, and now in Canada, you can literally go to jail for saying, no, that person is biologically not a unicorn. Well,
right, for
you know,
sure.
and now it's hate speech, right? So when they say speak your truth, even that's upside down, right? Even that's a lie. When you speak truth, people are going to hate it. So my answer to that was that, first, most people would not believe it. They in fact, it makes them angry. For again, yeah, go up to someone and try to tell them that the earth is not a spinning ball in space, and they'll first laugh, but if you press it, they'll get angry. All right, so um, that's an interesting manifestation. But I would say that, for myself, The answer I would have to give is it would depend on. Um, it would have to resonate with my heart. Certainly, I wouldn't believe it because of who told me, right? Because I don't necessarily listen to the messenger. I'm listening to the message, and so because of the eat the meat, throw away the bones things, right? Because I can find truth in stuff Alex Jones says, but Alex Jones is clearly Bill Hicks. I mean, but no, he's
Oh,
clearly
for sure, but
controlled
dude,
opposition and
yeah.
and full of shit. And so I don't idolize him in any way, and I take everything that he says as potentially a lie. However, he's throwing truth out there, and he has for a long time. So you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Similar. But so when it comes to anybody, Matt or Crow or Owen Benjamin or any of these guys who are trying to speak, truth, they're trying to look for it. They're going to make mistakes, right? And so I don't put any of them on a pedestal, and I don't put any of them above me in terms of their ability to find it. Now, some of them find interesting things, again, like Matt. Will come up on all kinds of stuff that I can go, interesting. I'll question that, and they swing for the fences, and some of them swing and miss, right? So I don't put a lot of weight in the messenger, right? Because I've had absolutely batshit crazy people tell me absolute truth, and I've had people who were the president of corporations and worth millions of dollars. They look you right in the eyes and lie to you. So the messenger is not necessarily where it's at. It's the message, and it's got to resonate with me. So I would hope that if I heard the truth, it would resonate with me in a way that I could receive it. And as you say, you might have to sit with it for a while and let it digest. Certainly, the shape of the earth did. I spent many sleepless nights trying to work that one out until it finally resonated with me as it was the only possible truth. Yet, given all the evidence, it was the preponderance of evidence said that if for me to be true to myself, I had to accept it for what it was. And and so I find most truth to be that way. That if I sit with it for a while, and it resonates with me, and I think from my experience, the more time I spend with my Creator and understand who and what He is, then the more a thing looks like Him, the better I resonate with it. Right. And so the less likely I am to resonate with things that are ugly and hateful and mean spirited and vile and wicked. I mean, whatever word you want to put on it, the, I don't resonate with those things anymore. Right. So it doesn't appeal to me because I spend time with someone who is perfect. For most people, they don't like to be faced with perfection because it makes them look bad. Right. Um, I don't have that problem anymore. Right. I want to be around it. I want to be around people who are um, uh, filled with life, but I also want to be around people who have suffered pain, right? People who are in the foxhole. When you get down into foxhole in battle, I want somebody who's got battle scars on them, right? Because they've been in a firefight. I don't want somebody who's in their pressed dress uniform because they
For
don't
sure.
know
And
shit.
they say there's no atheists in a foxhole, which I think people miss the point of that. I think that means that all of us in severe adversity will appeal to something that we know in the seat of our spirit is greater and more powerful than we are. But I don't think that means that there's not people who don't accept God in a foxhole. I think, in fact, if I'm in a foxhole with, just atheists and just strict dogmatic Christians, I'm going to go over near the atheists and be like, all right, you guys, I can rely on you. I know that you will serve your self interest and you'll serve mine. So I can turn my back and guard your back. And I know you're not going to let somebody sneak up on me because you're not going to be thinking God will
Well,
sort this.
I will say that the Christians often liken themselves to the army of God or whatever. And I will often say it's the only army in the world that I know of that that shoots their own wounded.
Oh man.
I mean,
Whew.
that's the my experience is that I have never gotten such healing, but I've never been so wounded as in church. Right? They will cannibalize, right? And because it's just people are people, right? It's not really in church or out of church. It's just people, right? And so uh, again, if people who use religion as a way for self advancement, or to belong to a club. Everybody wants to belong to something, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a gang or a cult or a political party or a political movement or a truth movement or whatever. People want to belong to something. They don't want to be alone. And that's again, I find that again, fear is one of the biggest motivators, and people fear being alone and ostracized. And that's why so many people, for example, won't even look at, flat earth or whatever, because they don't want to be laughed at. Right. So they're willing to stay in a lie because they're afraid. And I just find, again, I'll come back to this. I believe that fear is the opposite of love, and that people are just terribly afraid. I mean, they do all kinds of things. They steal because they're afraid that they won't have enough, right? They do all kinds of things because they're at the heart of it. They're afraid, and they're afraid of being alone. And these are the things that I see in people. People are badly wounded. They're really hurt. They are starving for love. They don't know where to get it, and they don't know how to get it, and they're terrified. Um, and the enemy runs all over with that, right? When I say the enemy, it doesn't matter who you think that is. If you think that's, the cabal or Illuminati or whatever, then okay, them too, right? They're going to use that as a means of control, uh, to um, to control you. People who are terrified look for help outside themselves. So that's, you want to say there's no atheist in a foxhole. Again, they're looking for help outside themselves because they're powerless over the situation. So that's the whole point of the Hegelian dialectic, right? Of government, the problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem. People like, save us from this terrible problem. Okay, we got an answer for you. We'll save you, right? That's the whole point for government to exist. Really, is the nature of control. So it doesn't matter whether it's church, whether it's government, or what it is. These truths remain. People want to belong to something that's greater than themselves, whether it's family or whatever, and and, um, and they're motivated by fear, and that and they need, and we starve for love. Those things are immutable truths to me over my journey here. Right, is that I see these things to be true, and that um, uh, people can be both amazingly beautiful and horrifically fucked up, and sometimes the same people. So we're complex individuals, but we're driven by much of the same things.
Yep. Yep. And we're overall, even those of us who I'll disagree with people that someone called globetards or whatever. I just call them ignorant. It's not that they're bad or
No,
anything, ignorant.
well, we all were, right? We
I'll
were all
disagree with those people. Um,
we
but
were all taught the globe lie. So, I mean, everybody was that person at one point. There are some people who are willfully ignorant, right? Again, they look at the truth and they consciously deny it, right? So those people probably, I don't know, maybe deserve some opprobrium a little bit, but for most people, they just don't know, right? And their immediate instinct is going to be to mock it and uh, to fight it, because it's not just a lie. There's a built-in, it's programming, right? It's hypnosis, it's mind control. And so the fact that people get angry and hostile about it tells me for sure that that's not a natural response. When people get angry over it, that tells me that it's not um, just a basic belief, right? It's a mind control weapon, and that's a landmine that's been put in there to keep you from finding the truth. I think the same thing is largely true about, they try to do the same thing, for example, with Christianity and media. Like, you can, everything is okay. Search for God with Zen or with Satanism or with Muslims or, whatever, but don't go to Christianity. And then if you get a little God, spirituality, but God, but Jesus, oh, that's bad. Like, get angry about that. It's like, man, it strikes me as really weird, right? Even Lindsay from Rogue Ways, right? She has nothing to do with Christianity really, but she does find it strange that everything is okay except that we're supposed to hate that. I go, yeah, that's an interesting thing, huh? Right?
oh yeah,
So,
for
so
sure.
I think sometimes it is easier to work backwards and go, whatever they're telling you, you should believe. Flip that upside down, It's never exactly 180 degrees. It's sort of like, 165. They sort of pitch it over on its side a little bit. But certainly, whatever they're trying to tell you is the truth is not the truth. I'll tell you that for sure. And
Well, and I saw a meme that I think kind of embodies this, and it shows a picture of Jesus, and he's like, hey, and doing his little holy thing. There's something flying out, some sunshine coming from his heart, and he says, I will, like, if you follow my rules basically, and do right and treat others well, I will reward you for it in the afterlife. And then it shows some new cage, young person going, what the fuck? That's bullshit. Sounds like a joke. And then it shows Buddha, and Buddha's like, and he's got sunshine coming out of his heart. And he's like, if you follow my rules, I will reward you for it in the afterlife. And the
yeah, it's
new
like,
kid,
dude, far out.
like, they're like, dude, no way, man. Oh man, this is the way, the path, the
Yeah,
truth, and the light.
yeah.
And
It,
that does
I find that, yeah, I've seen that, and it is fairly true. Although, I'll go back to just even the idea of, Jesus saying, "If you follow my rules, I'll reward you." Right? To me, that is entirely, um, that's what we're given to believe, but that's, to me, that my experience is that's not even how it is. Right? It's, come get to know me, come unto me, and I will give you rest. Right? And let me heal your heart. Everything else comes out of that. It's not keep my rules or do what I say. Right? It's, I'm here to help you. Right? That's my experience. It's not a, keep these rules. Most people think, they've got this idea of, like, to stay out of hell, just don't be an asshole. Right? There's like this balance. And so as long as I did good enough, right, on the whole, I was better than I was an asshole. So, that'll get me good. It just doesn't work that way. Right? It's like, you were born into, again, I don't go with the whole nuclear hoax thing, but with that idea, you were born in the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust, and so everybody's got radiation poisoning, and it's not your fault, but you're going to die. Right? So if you don't take the antidote for it, you're going to die a horrible death from radiation poisoning. Right? You can go, fuck that, I'm not taking your stupid pill. Yeah. You can do that. That's fine. I'm going to come up with my own medicine, I know it. Okay, you can do that. But here it is. Here's a pill for free. All you got to do is, get to know me. Don't steal it from me. Just, come hang out with me and be my friend, and then I'll give it to you for free. Right? To me, that's exactly what it's like. Um, and in the process, you become an awesome person because you get to know this awesome person, and you want to be like them. Right? So that's my experience. I know um, this amazing guy, right? And
yeah,
it's he's really good to me, and so I love him for it, and he makes me want to be better, and so and he teaches me how. That's my entire experience. It has nothing to do with rule keeping or comparing yourself to others or going, you got to do these things, and if you don't, it's none of my business what other people do. I mean, other than,
right.
I don't want them hurting me,
And
and I don't like them hurting other people, but it's none of my business what they do.
right. And that's, and that's what it says, is that you're not your brother's keeper, but it really encourages you to keep yourself in a way where you could keep your brother, as or like,
Yeah, I want to look out for people and I want to help them, but it's not my business. Right? It's not, um it's none of my job to call people out for, doing stuff. It's like,
and I know that this isn't, you aren't living any way that you're living to get a reaction. But I hope that you understand that when I say this, it's a very sincere thing. Most people who speak to me about the God of their heart, I am almost revolted by what they tell me, and it's scary. It's not like, it sounds like this God is it's honestly, I'm like, shit, man, if that's, ooh, I'm glad that I'm not talking to that guy.
you know what,
But
Russell? Me too.
right, and when but
People
when I
tell me
speak to
about their
you,
God, I'm like, oh, that's gross.
right, when I speak to you, I can see, because I do know I was in ministry. I know I prayed in the name of Christ and I got things. I saw people receive direct revelate divine benefit. It was real. And when I speak to somebody like you who's got their head on their shoulders and they're able to approach it in a way where you're able to tell me your honest personal experience, that makes me think, you know what, this Jesus guy, he might be real. Um, and that's, that's as far as I'm going right now. But you're not trying to convert me, but in living like that and just being true to yourself and being true to your father, you're the God of your heart. That's someone I want to get to know. And I hope that that you appreciate that
No,
because it's
I
not.
do, and I mean, my experience is I would think that he want to get to know you too, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, certainly I would want for other people to get to know the guy that I like because I like him, right? So I mean, but yeah, I'm not running around trying to again convert anybody or anything. I'm certainly it touches me deeply, and I'm sincerely honored, right? That you sense that what I'm that what I when I describe my friend, that's appealing to you because um, that's how I see him, right? So I mean, I wouldn't want to do him a disservice and go, "Oh, he's an asshole." But as you said, a lot of people when they describe their God to me, I'm just like, "Oh man, no,
Right.
no." I,
Oh,
I'm
sorry to hear that, man.
yeah, count me out, buddy. So, and that's when I said earlier on, right? That I meet a lot of people with it that take the name Christian, and they're exactly like that, right? They're just dogmatic freaks, and um, they're just zealots for their religion. And I have no time or place for religion. It's just not. Um, and in fact, again, what it says in the Bible, it's like you want religion. This is religion, right? Go take care of orphans. Go take care of widows. Go visit people in prison, right? That's
Yeah.
what religion looks like, and that's the kind of thing that I want to do, right? Is like that's where I find my biggest, if you want to say joy, but fulfillment, I guess, is in comforting people who hurt, right? And because there's a lot of hurt going around. And so if I can be there and be of comfort to somebody, and again, mostly that just involves sitting with them and weeping with them. I do a lot of crying. I mean, but being with people when they hurt and, not judging them and not trying to tell them things are going to be okay because it's not going to be okay for a while,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that's a
It's just,
platitude. It's false.
it's false, right? So, but you don't want to be alone when it hurts, right? And you just want somebody to care. And if I can fulfill that role for people, then I feel like I've done some good. And that is the kind of role that again my friend plays for me. My creator plays that role for me. He's there when I hurt, right? And so that's what it looks like to me, right? As far as I can tell.
That's that's all I needed to hear, buddy. I mean, I'm open to hearing more, but I think that like that's really I think we summed it up. Like I what we weren't trying to tackle like who is the Christian God? What name should we call him by? What are his like favorite flowers?
Oh
You
God.
know, we were just talking about what has God done for you, and how do you know that God is good, and what is good? What is and I think you summed it up. I didn't, we didn't get a chance to maybe talk about some of these more like heady, philosophical little thought games and questions, but I I don't really think that was the major takeaway that I was trying to get here is that God is good to people, whether or not we feel that God has been good to us. There's people that I trust like you, like my mother, like other people that I worked with in ministry, other people that were homeless, crack addicts that I prayed for, that God was good to them. And I'm not trying to like testify to that so that people will believe in a God and see this. I'm just trying to put it out there because I'm gonna conquer and tackle some things on this podcast that are I'm gonna be wrong a lot, but I wanted to start off on something that we can generally agree on. Like we don't have to agree on who God is, but I think this will be a good kind of intro to as far as I can tell. Because if people have a problem with this, they might not be qualified for the rest of the podcast.
You're in the wrong saloon, right? Yeah, no, I think though that that would be my observation, right? Is that if you want to know who God is, you're not going to be able to figure him out. If you want to do it through philosophy or those heady things, he's bigger than that. And if you want to if you want to know who he is, the only way to do that is to get to know him. And that's my take. All right, that's my takeaway. Is that that's the only way you're really going to know. You're not going to find him in a book. You're not going to find him in a church. You're not going to find him in any of those places, right? You're going to find him in your heart, and um, that's my experience.
And that's it, buddy.
Right, buddy. I gotta wrap it up here, man. It's 11:11. We got those big master numbers. So, um,
Baboom.
Baboom. So, hey, listen, man, I love you, and thanks for having this conversation with me. It's always a joy speaking with you, and you know, it's always fun for me to talk about my friend too. So, like I said, I've talked more about him during this period of time than I have in a year, like especially straight. Like I don't talk, even my wife, I don't talk about it that much.
Oh,
So,
for no, I eked this out of you, and we you go and take a listen to it when you have time, or send it to me,
yeah.
and we'll determine if there's. I don't think we said anything that was really made a fool of us,
No,
but
I don't care. I mean, again, I'm just honest. I just say the things. So I'm
I guess doing the right thing. How do we know what that is? And like I've been studying, moral relativity versus like moral absolutism.
Mhm.
Um, and at first I was looking into like, kind of thought experiments. Like what if a Muslim woman from a country where they clitorectomize children is like lives in my neighborhood and her kid plays with mine and I let her babysit mine and then she clitorectomizes my daughter. Well, then does that mean because to her that might be right? Like it may be that there's demons entering through, premarital sex. Who knows? But does that make it okay for her? And I was thinking this. Well, that's clearly not. I don't think it's okay. I think God says it's not okay, or nature. But the more I think about it, I think, well, I mean, it makes it not okay for me. I will then find it okay to murder her, but is it not okay? I mean, I don't, isn't that just isn't morality just kind of made up? I mean, it seems like that.
Okay. So these are great questions, and I think certainly questions that mankind has philosophized and pontificated on for most of their existence. I think the first caveat I want to throw out is that any answer that I provide, even if it seems that I'm speaking with confidence and clarity, is a representative of my view of things. So I'm not going to speak in absolutisms in terms of what I say is actually the truth, or it can be held up as the gold standard for what is right and wrong, since we're talking about those subjects, but the way that I see it. So if you if you can take that with the understanding, the spirit in which it's given for most things, I think that absolute certainties, I think that's the sole domain of charlatans and fools, really. If you're absolutely certain about something, it's especially these sorts of things, you're certainly getting into some muddy waters, if not very dangerous territory, when you start to make other people comport to it. And I think that's part of the nature of your question. So anyway, that's the little caveat to begin with, is that
Yes, sir.
I'm going to speak from my perspective and what I accept at the present time as being the closest to accurate as I can get.
As far as you can tell,
Yeah.
that's all I really want from anybody because, like you said, yeah, and that's one of my favorite maxims. Did you come up with that? Absolute certainties.
Yeah, that's kind of mine. It's like absolute certainties is the sole domain of, I call it frauds and fools, or charlatans. And I mean, but that's, they're either lying to you or they're deceived, right? They are themselves deceived. um because
Right.
anybody who's that certain, again, is either foolish, or they're lying. So whatever great, you know descriptors you want to put in there, I have used frauds and fools, and different things that sounded good in the
Right.
moment. But yeah, that
Yeah.
is the sort of my truism. If you
But
want, I'll
as you know,
copyright
my this podcast, I think I'm gonna do it on something other than because I have a, as far as I can tell,
it. Hmm.
YouTube, but that's got some other stuff on it, and I'd kind of like to just make a new one and just kind of promote that and try to get subscribers. But that is what my YouTube is called. And that I think that's really that gets down to it. That's what I think we should be talking about in the truth communities because it's like when you get into oh they use nanothermite to do this or
Hmm.
it's I, I don't fucking know and I haven't seen anyone benefit from figuring out like for sure exactly what's going on because
Sure.
no one seems to.
Well, I think, and I love it. That's a great name. When you said it, I was like, hey, that's a terrific name for a podcast. And there you go. There you go. As far as I can tell, yeah, that's it works in a number of different ways. So, but for me, yeah, when I'm discussing things with people at any level on anything, whether it's conspiracy theories, right, stuff going down the rabbit hole, or whether it's philosophizing about life or spiritual matters, especially, my take is that everybody is entitled to, and they're going to have their own view. And that's a whole nother discussion altogether, is why I think there's a reason for that, and that is, and everybody's very guarded and protective of theirs, right? So many people seem to be of the opinion of, well, I blew my capsule out, I think, seem to be of the, it's going to be problematic, man. I got to be careful about that. So
That's cool.
yeah, it's, hang on. So yeah, that's a really unfortunate. I got a condenser microphone, and I hit it was the first time I heard it break up earlier, and this time I hit it with a plosive right across the diaphragm, and it kind of shook it up. Anyway, so yeah, people have a tendency to be very well. They think that their view is right. So you can go to scripture here. All the ways of a man are clean in his own eyes. That's from the book of Proverbs, and that certainly seems to be true from my observation. Is that we have a way to we want to justify our actions. So whatever it is that we do in our own internal narrative, we justify it as meaningful and righteous, even if we know it's a bad thing, like murder. Again, but I had good reason to. Right, so it's justifiable homicide. So we justify the things that we do, and furthermore, we seem to need, or at least most people do, for other people to agree with us. And so many people, what I would call evangelize, or they try to get other people to agree with their position. And if they can't, they will use opprobrium, or kind of ad hominem attacks that they'll often try to push or shame, or um, you know in some other way, you, you know well, I could say, convince, but under duress, um,
Right.
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 So really, they're coercing people into accepting their view. And I think, the two parts of that: one is that they want to feel right, but two is that I think that people feel if other people disagree with them, then perhaps they're wrong, and they don't want to be wrong. So very few people seem to have the kind of, just even keeled self-confidence or self-awareness to understand that other people are going to have their own views, and it's not likely that they're going to uh, that they're going to share exactly the same view, even if they say they do. So, and again, I think this all kind of feeds into the nature of your question, right? Which is that what's morality, right? Is there relativism, absolutism? Is there a right and wrong? There's again, these are the concepts that have been spoken about by a lot of people, and one of the um, we can go. Plato certainly had his thoughts on it, as did Aristotle.
What my thought is, I wonder if any of these guys actually knew what the fuck they were talking about, or what God was talking about with these maxims, this forms that are written in the sky,
Well,
or
well,
or if they were just, because it is like it's philosophy, as far as I can tell. But a lot of the people that are absolutists are, or even hedonists or Epicureans, they're still preaching these things in a way of this is the way it is.
yeah, I mean, and again, many people have that sense of confidence and certainty. I mean, for me, even I can speak with confidence and certainty because it's based in my experience and observation, and I'm comfortable with that, right? So, but that doesn't, from my perspective, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm saying it is certainly that way, but I can be fairly confident that my experience proves that out, right? So but well, when again, we get into tricky territory here when you're talking about when people begin to ascribe it to a deity, right? And there are consequences to these things, more than just what happens in terms of your society standing. That if again, if your neighbor uh, cuts the naughty bits off your daughter, right? That there's going to be consequences to that. So more than just how you see her, but then there's legal consequences, and then ultimately we get into moral consequences. Is there a hell? Are you going to even just karmically, right? Just is nature, is the universe going to take care of it in terms of counterbalancing on its own? So what do these things mean, and what are the outcomes of departure from what we would call right or wrong? But when you get into the area of stating these things as concrete, and that they do have consequences for the person if they stray from what the um, the orator is saying is the right and wrong, right? Now we get into what I consider religion, right? Which is I'm telling you what God says, and these are the punishments or the results if you don't. And moreover, I'm not going to let him take care of that. I'm going to do it myself because he's too slow to work. So I have a great deal of trouble with that. I would guess I would say I see that as wrong. Right. That so to me, that's uh, that's certainly uh, well. I don't know what kind of superlative you want to put on it, but it's absolutely not acceptable, right? So just
Right, and
unacceptable.
that to me is like, that is when I see something as wrong, it is that it is absolutely not acceptable. I am not willing to be okay with that.
Right.
It's not that I'm like, that's wrong for you. I'm like, that's not okay with me. I won't let it go on within my sphere of influence. I will do what I need to in order to deal with that,
So
or
okay, and now you're getting into, so, and this is, I think, where we there are some dividing lines, right? There's, to me, there's some very clear division lines of demarcation here, and we'll go back to your example of the presumably Muslim woman or whatever, your neighbor who's doing this clitectomy. So when you say you're not going to allow it in your sphere of influence, so this could go to are you not going to then, so here'd be my stake, and here's my line on that, is that if she, to your question, if she messed with your daughter, right? So I
right,
would say that's absolutely wrong, because she took her beliefs and she put it on somebody else. She actually did an action that affects somebody else by her own hand, right? So she didn't just believe it or try to convince you of it so that you would do it. She did it herself. She took it under her own purview to do that, and she acted upon it without permission, right? And without, you know, any further guidance. She just did it of her own because she thought it was right. She may think it's right, and from my perspective, it's okay for her to think. Now, I disagree with her, but I think that she has the right to think that's okay. Even,
Right.
but that stops with her ability to speak about it, maybe try to convince others. But if she uses even there, I stop with manipulation. If you're using coercion, manipulation, cult mindset, group think, that sort of stuff, if it's an unnatural, if you deny them their will, right, and their right to choose, then we're going to have problems. But here again, we get in this dividing line, this funny territory. You say not within my sphere of influence. Then are you going to not allow them to speak it or believe it, right? So again, believe it, that's one thing. How do you stop somebody from believing? But then talk about it, right? You can't talk about it in my neighborhood. How about practice it? So here we get into funny territory. Is it legal then for her to do her own daughter? She's the adult, she's the parent. In the United States, certainly, they treat children as a form of property, and so they belong. Minor children really are, their choices are legally made by their parent or legal guardian. So then that parent can choose for them, even stuff like this, or transitioning, that sort of stuff, which that's a whole different thing to get into. But the parent has the right to choose there against even the will of the child, which again, I have some trouble with. But there's the legal ramifications there. So can she choose that for her child? In the United States, legally. However, is there a law against it? And in some places, I think it's state to state, there are laws against genital mutilation and that sort of stuff that would cause physical change to the child. So certainly some people are considering it, and I think it's good that they do. I'm never a fan of government taking under their purview, and under that they have the ability to control what people do with their own bodies, in anything, whether that's ingestion of materials, food, um, where you can go, what you can say. I don't think they should. They have the authority to manage that. No, they disagree,
Right. Yeah.
right?
They adamantly.
Yes. So
Here, this is my thought, and this is like, as I struggle with this because I think I'm probably making some logical errors here that I'm just not seeing. But it seems to me that, like, I would encourage others to do to follow their heart's desire, but I'd encourage them to really sincerely think about it. And I would encourage people, if you truly feel like it's the right thing to murder somebody, I'd encourage you to do it. I'd
oh dear.
also encourage other people, if they as a community say that was unjust, we need to imprison you or murder you, I'd encourage them to do it, but I encourage them to all do it together as a common law kind of court community, and to approach it in a really logical, reasonable manner. Like, who was harmed? Can we prove they were harmed? What's a successful remediation we can all agree on?
Okay, so here's where I'd challenge that line of thinking, right, and say that you're encouraging somebody, if you feel that it's right, it's truly right to take someone else's life, right? That's sort of the ultimate control over somebody else's will. You took away their will to survive. So, from my perspective, Russ, I think that that you can believe what you want, and right and wrong is okay for you to choose. But when it crosses the line to you're taking action that physically or materially affects another person without their will, then that's where I draw the line. So I would say, to me, I would say no to that. If you believe that it's righteous and necessary to kill another person, then again, I would say to the idea of, okay, well, if there's a societal thing and a group of people gets together, then again, there has to be decision. So here's where I think the concept, right, of choices, and where government, quote, is supposed to be a reflection of the general will of the people. That's the general idea, right? Is that it is the collective will of the people to act as a corporate entity, as a body, so that
I think,
so
yeah.
that the person then who is being killed, right? Presumably has submitted their will overall by being a part of that community, and being under the auspice of the government itself, that if they choose, if the, the group chooses that he's going to perish, he's submitted his will and therefore must abide by the consequences, rather than just one versus one. So again, to me, anytime that you're acting against somebody else's will, um, that in any, whether it's murder or whether it's painting their fingernails, if they haven't given their explicit permission, if they haven't exercised their power of will and choice, then that to me, that would be wrong. And I think that now we're getting into some of the areas where the whole idea of what I call karmic shrugging, or many people call the revelation of the method, wherein the controllers seem to be following a path in which they must, not just to poke in the eye, but they must reveal what they're doing, which from their mindset appears to be, if I tell you and your action is inaction, if I tell you and you do nothing about it, you have agreed to it, and therefore I can move forward without any repercussions. That's what it seems to be the case. So even they follow along with this idea of people must be allowed to use their will. And even those people, right, we're talking about the powers that be here, and right, the powers of
Right.
darkness and all this sort of stuff that those in our community all sort of see collectively as the bad guys, right? But even they seem to be following this idea that there is an immutable morality, right? That even they are following a set of rules. Now, it may be in the most fucked up way, and maybe that they're twisting those guidelines and rules, as they're stretching the rules as far as they can. But apparently, they follow some set of rules that they believe that there is an immutable set of morality that must be followed. Right, so that there is a right and wrong. I think I mentioned Plato and Aristotle earlier, and you asked, are they right? And I'm like, well, I know certainly from Aristotle, he didn't lay it out as these are like the Ten Commandments, right? That'd be more Moses, and through the hand of Yahweh, apparently, because the first set
Right.
was written by his finger, right? That these are the things. And again, that's a different conversation. I can get into even my view on what that is. I see them less as commandments and more as a description, right? If you are my people, these are the things you will do. No, not as this is what you have to do. It's like, this is what you will do. Like, here's a
Right.
list.
It's like a definition of,
Exactly.
like,
Yep.
if you work for me, if you want this job, well, then you're gonna need to be able to chop French fries. You have to
Sure.
be able to operate
Yeah.
a fryer, and you have to, just be careful to always wear non-slip shoes.
Yeah, and I've equated it like this, right? If there's a list of, say, 10 things that a man must do to be a good husband, right? So he's going to speak a kind word to his wife. He's going to encourage her. He's going to buy her flowers for her birthday, or whatever. You got this list of 10 things. So a guy gets married and he takes this list, and he he follows this list, and every day he says, your hair looks nice, and buys her flowers for her birthday, blah blah. And he does everything on this list, but he's a complete asshole, right? He cheats on her. Maybe he beats her, right? He does, but technically he's following that list of the 10 things. Is he a good husband? Well,
No.
I would contend no. He's the worst
Right.
kind of husband, because it's manipulative and it's gaslighting. So now he's pushing this idea that he is following the rules and he's doing everything on that list and really well, but he's an asshole. And so this is what I have to say toward Christians who are, even though they say they're not legalistic and they're under grace and not under the law, that's their argument. Well, the people who claim to have grace are the least likely to extend it, right? They're the one calling out other people and telling them how bad they're going to sin and they're going to burn in hell because they're not following the rules. Well, but those are, those are your rules, or it's not. That's you can
Right.
disagree with it, and you can even say, I'll give you this. You can even say you're doing poorly, but you're then doing poorly, because to me that's not how Dad is, right? He's I say Dad, I mean the Creator God. That's my
Yeah,
relationship with
sure.
him as Dad. But that's sort of for him to decide, right? So if he says do these things or whatever, then you do it. So anyway, get back to that kind of circumlocution here, going around in circles, but I'm getting back to the idea that with the Christians, you take care of you first, right? Like if you're if you're looking down your nose at somebody else, and this is what even Jesus said, is he said, hey, how can you tell somebody they've got a splinter in their eye when you get a board sticking out of your own, right? So first take care of your own lumber, and then you can deal with the sawdust. And they're very much like that, right? And so that's a problem I always have with legalism in terms of a spiritual condition, whether that's Christianity or whether whether it's even Zen, right? Is that if you're using a measure to say I'm somewhere on my thing, I think almost every religion has the precept that it is that perfection is pretty much impossible to achieve. You're getting as close to it
But
as you can, and that's your desire.
yes,
But you're going to fall short of that, right? And so that we're just
just
trying to constantly improve. But if the definition is that you're going to fall short of that and not be perfect, then using legalism or using a list, the only result of that is that the only comparison is you're going to look at and see, how am I doing compared to everybody else? And so that inherently creates a sense, a judgment and the condescending, right? That I'm doing, look at me, I'm doing better than you because now, I kept 9 of those things and you only did 7. So you're an asshole. However, again, if you go back to, if you want to look at scripture, the apostle Paul said, right, if you've broken one, you've broken the whole thing, because it's the spirit of the thing, right? The whole point is you fucked up. Right? And in fact, the
right.
whole point, what Paul argues, is the whole point of that is to show you that you are a fuck up. Right? And not just a fuck up, but I don't mean it that way, but
Right, that you're
you're broken,
inherently
right?
internally flawed, not
Exactly, that you have a
you're
tendency, yes, you have a tendency toward doing imperfect things, and that's its whole point, is to point out this is the way of perfection and this is you, right? And so the whole point is not to show how close you are to compared to somebody else, but rather to show you that you're flawed and that you need a way to become less flawed, right? And here's an
right.
opportunity to do that. So anyway, that seems to be what it is, and trying to get all the way back to the beginning, which is that well, I think that kind of actually ties it together, is that when you the difference is whether whatever code of morality you're going by, right? If you try to push this on somebody else, right, now you're doing exactly, to me, the wrong thing, right? Is that the whole idea of the code of morality must be will comes first, the power of choice. So you agree to those things as the accepted communal guidelines, and
If
then
it's Yeah, if it's natural law, it must be within our own nature, and we must not need. It must be unnecessary for us to like draw from societal constraints. Like it must be written in our hearts if it's
yes,
truly natural.
yes, that's a great way to put it. And even again, Scripture says that as well. That's written in your heart. That, and again, I was going to. So, having mentioned Plato and Aristotle, I'll go to one of the modern guys, C.S. Lewis, who you probably know from *Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe* and the whole Narnia series.
Mhm.
He was a amazing philosopher. Of course, he was close friends with Tolkien at Oxford, and they were both tenured professors there. But Lewis had begun as his early life. He was an avowed rabid atheist, and then
Oh,
later became a Christian. For me, in a weird, he took a weird journey there. Is in that mostly what I find, again from my perspective, it's a relationship, right? It's not a religion, but it's a relationship, and so it's an emotional response to a being, right? You fall in love with this being. But Lewis did. He was an intellectual, and so he approached it as an intellectual pursuit, and he came to a place of much like, for example, many people have with the idea of rejecting the heliocentric model, and they see it as a sort of the snow globe thing. It by definition means it's a created thing, meaning that there is a creator, meaning that you I mean, it'd be a good idea. Wouldn't it be great to get to know the guy who built all that stuff? Um, Irrespective of what you might think of him by description, if you don't get to know him personally, how do you know? So, but it does lead people to go, hey, there's a creator. So many people who were, evolutionists and um, atheists or agnostics came to an idea of accepting a creator once they see the truth, that the world is not what they thought it was, and it is an enclosed created space. So Lewis did the same thing. Well, not on that topic, but he approached it from an intellectual standpoint and thought experiment, and went through this idea, and he came to it about this very topic of there being a certain universal natural law of morality. And if there was not, um, it would be observable, and it's observable that there is inherent in mankind a sense, as you say, of right and wrong. We are born with a sense of justice. Oddly enough, we expect there to be justice, but every shred of evidence in my experience of the world points otherwise. It's not, things here aren't fair. They're not as they should be. But that
This is a
also,
it's a fallen realm.
yeah,
It's not like
that's
people,
exactly what it points to me. Yes,
right, people that try to tell me like, oh well, this is, that's just like Earth could be super fantastic, but we all made all these poor decisions. I'm like, that's clearly not what's going on. Like if you look at how people are inclined to behave within the natural realm here, just you versus nature, or you versus you know the people that live next to you,
sure. Yeah.
it's clearly some type of fallen realm. This isn't like, it's got to be a test. It has to be a test, and that's why I come back to that. It seems like there is some type of natural law.
It
It
seems,
really
it
does.
does seem that way to me as well, Russell. And it also leads me this, and I'm sure this will ruffle some feathers because people believe strongly about this, but it also leads me to reject the idea of inherent duality, dualism, that there must be, in order for there to be light, there must be darkness. So there must be a balance. I realize that there is a sort of dualism or opposing forces, but I don't think it has to be good and evil. And I could explain that in a later conversation. I do see it as perfection broken. That's the way that I see the world. It was designed to be perfect, and it is perfection broken. It's not
Hmm.
it's not a go-kart. It's a Mercedes that's been in an accident.
Right, for sure.
So anyway, with that, this has been a terrific conversation. I do have to bounce for now, but I love this, and I'd like to pick it up later if you'd like.
I would
These are
love that.
fascinating topics, and yep, there's my call. So anyway, love you, dude, and we'll talk again soon.
Love you too. Take it
I'll,
easy, Baldini.
yeah, man, you too.